Good morning and welcome to this Pittsburgh City Council budget hearings. I am Councilwoman Erica Strasburger and I chair the Committee on Finance and Law. And for this hearing, we will hear from the Department of Finance, including the three taxing bodies, the Department of Law, and the Ethics Hearing Board. So first, I would like to invite those from Finance to join us at the table. And while you're joining us, I'll ask our Budget Director, Peter McDevitt, to give a brief overview of the department.
Thank you. The mission for the Department of Finance provides fiscal leadership for the city focused on long-term financial health while respecting the interests of its residents. It also carries an important responsibility to ensure all entrepreneurs, visionaries, and leaders have the necessary services and city infrastructure to thrive. As the City of Pittsburgh's primary revenue generator, the Finance Department is committed to excellence in financial management for the city, its residents, and its businesses. A quick overview, the Department of Finance has 5 major divisions, each with several subsections. The Administration and Treasury Division, Business Intelligence Division, the Real Estate Division, the Tax Compliance Division, and the Cash Management Division. A quick position summary, there is a total of 40.95 positions in the general fund, and this is the first one. We do this every year, but just to point out, there's going to be percentages of full-time positions, and that's just because sometimes a portion of it is paid out of the general fund and the rest of it is paid out of a separate trust fund. Overall, there's an increase of $51,604, or about 2.2% increase from last year. There were a number of position swaps made in the budget, and those are outlined for you. Moving on, a summary of non-personnel changes. The Department of Finance is where the city's pension and debt service payments are budgeted, so approximately 29% of the city's operating budget is housed here. The city's pension contribution for 2025 decreased by $8.7 million for the MMO, but the additional pension fund was increased by $7.5 million, so savings realized are only around $1.1 million, but we're still making a good, healthy contribution to our pension, which is very important. Overall, there's a $3.3 million increase in the Department of Finance non-personnel budget. That includes $52,000 decrease in professional and technical services, a $1.25 million decrease in property services. That's for landscaping associated with city land maintenance, which was mostly funded by ARP previously. There's also a $68,000 increase for supplies, a $10,000 increase for miscellaneous, and $4.5 million increase in debt service. And that goes along with the anticipated bond issuance in 2025 that we talked about a little bit yesterday. But again, as a reminder, we will have separate legislation at the beginning of the year next year. So Matt Stuzinski can come only once or twice instead of multiple times. With the anticipated bond of $62 million. Finance has no capital projects, but they do use the 3 taxing bodies trust fund, so just a quick overview of that. The expenditures for that are salaries and wages and other related expenses that are incurred by the city in its employment of personnel related to the maintenance and disposition of the properties owned by the 3 taxing bodies. We also have the other post-employee benefits trust fund. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. We haven't used this much in the past because we've been building up the balance for it, but now it does have a healthy balance and is kind of self-sustaining. So we are able to utilize that to offset costs in the general fund. That's mostly under human resources for OPEB payments. That is for investment and administrative expenses. When the fund becomes large enough, it will eventually be used to pay retirees, other post-employment benefits, which is mostly retiree health care. So we've reached that point. This year we also have fee schedules included. So the Department of Finance presents the entire fee schedule, but they only have 2 fees in it. And they are listed there, the NSF fee and the property sale application fee. And there's no changes to those. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Director McDevitt. And for the record, we've been joined by Councilperson Barb Warwick. Now for the department, if you could introduce yours. And we have also been joined online by Councilperson Bob Charland. So thank you all for joining. And for the department, if you can introduce yourselves, including your title.
Sure. I'm Jennifer Gula. I'm the finance director and also the treasurer for the City of Pittsburgh and the City of Pittsburgh School District.
I'm Ian Fitzgerald. I'm the deputy director for the Department of Finance.
Wonderful. Do you have a presentation or anything you'd like to share with us, or we can launch into questions?
We could probably launch into questions. I think our budget is pretty much self-explanatory. We really don't have a lot of requests, or, we've been basically able to manage things that we need by just reorganization of the department and position swaps. So we don't really have anything that we requested except for increases in postage, because obviously it's evident that the postage costs are rising. Other than that, there's really not much to add. So if anybody has any questions, it would be helpful, help answer. And
Excellent. Well, I'll turn it over to Councilperson Warwick first to.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for being here. I guess just first of all, since just so for the public to kind of hear, if you want to talk a little bit about because I think there's been a significant increase in property sales. Is that accurate? Do you want to talk a little bit about that, just about the work you've been doing?
Sure.
With the same staff through the reorganization, what you've been able to do in terms of property sales?
Absolutely. So traditionally, well, just to give you some history, the finance operates, or there's a trust fund called the Three Taxing Bodies Trust Fund, and it lives in the finance department. This is where we hold all of the properties that the city has taken through the treasurer sale process for non-payment of taxes. These properties are held by the three taxing bodies, the city, the school district, and the county, which are all of the members that actually have a taxing interest in the property itself. The way the trust fund should operate is the three bodies actually contribute to a budget to operate that, and all the expenses, including personnel, are paid out of the trust fund that are specifically for the use of selling those properties and putting them back on the tax rolls. In the past, that trust fund has traditionally lost money. The operating budget for the trust fund basically existed just to maintain everything, along with, sharing the expenses. The three taxing bodies are also supposed to share in the revenues when we sell property, but traditionally they've just gone back in to keep everything operating. There's really been no profit to speak for. We have lost money basically because we've been holding on to properties and paying for their maintenance and not generating any revenue, so to speak. This was especially bad prior to COVID and during COVID, mostly because the courts were also shut down, so that it limited our ability to do quiet title, which is necessary when we transfer property to a new owner. Since then, using the same employees and not adding any more employees to their current payroll, we've been consistently, we just did some reorganization and basically cleaned up our own house and have been moving properties very steadily out of the city's inventory. This is also not just the work that we've done internally, but we've also used our partners, the URA and the land bank, to help facilitate that as well. So we all share, it's probably a third, basically contributed to actually the sales. So we have been, anticipating for years that this trust fund would run out of money, and we are actually seeing a profit. We're in the black. So this year we actually reached $1 million. That's net of any of the, budgetary expenses. So that's a huge, huge, huge accomplishment.
Great, thank you. The other thing just want to ask about, just because it came up, so around tax time, there were some issues with the system, I know, that happened, I don't know, people may be paid and then it wasn't coming through, but I wanted just to see if you wanted to address that, and maybe what for next year, how we're gonna.
So the city's tax system, especially where real estate is concerned, is over 25 years old. I've been with the city for 24 years and it predates me. So, and to be honest, this is a direct result of like Act 47, right? We had to basically keep whatever it was that we had. We weren't spending money on updating systems, and which is kind of crazy because we're the department that brings in over half of the city's budget, and we had the smallest amount of resources. But we're in the process of changing that now. So there are things that do occur in the current tax system that we will be migrating from, or in the process of migrating from, that makes it at times difficult to collect. So for next year, we should be close to entering in the new tax system. So some of these things that are happening now won't be happening in the future. And there's also an online component to the new system, which will actually allow the public to view their own account and get things like e-bills, and they could track to see when their payments are hit. They could actually get their own receipts. It's more self-service, so that those things will be available to them, which will actually allow my staff to focus on doing more things on the compliance end, and people will be able to actually serve themselves. So
Got it. Okay, great. So basically, I mean, if I can summarize, it's sort of, this year has been a migration year. When you're migrating between systems, it can cause issues. I mean, that next year we'll hopefully be fully migrated to the new system.
we will be. There's also been issues too with all the refunds and things, the changes in assessment that are coming through from the county. They're very large files, and it's very high volume. So like keeping up with those kinds of things too, like we have to manually place them into the system in order for them to take effect, which can be very time consuming. And if you miss one, it causes a whole chain of events that's not very pleasant for us or taxpayers. So those things will hopefully not exist. They won't be manual. They will be part of a process that's consistently ongoing and will be ingested by the system. So it make things a lot easier for taxpayers, and they should get like things like refunds a lot quicker,
Okay.
because they won't have to rely on like a person actually placing a file in a system to get a result. So
Got it. And are we no longer going to be using Jordan?
we are not using Jordan Tax Services. I'm very happy to say, for prior year tax collection. So
Okay.
that's not for the school district though. This is only for the city, the library, and the parks tax.
Okay.
So going forward, if you receive a prior year tax bill, it's only for those three, but you will deal directly with the city and not with Jordan Tax Services. Unfortunately, if you owe school taxes, you still will have to contact them
Okay.
in order to clear up your account for the school side. But for the city, you will deal with the finance department only.
Okay.
That's
great.
actually made a huge impact this year on our refunds. We've actually increased the prior year revenue collection on the real estate side, which helped to offset a lot of the refunds due to assessment changes that were mostly attributed so far to prior year tax. So because we did that, it was less of a financial impact to the city.
Great.
Can I add one thing
Yeah,
about,
please.
so our relationship with the county when it comes to assessments, we rely on them to obviously do the assessment values as well as kick off refunds. We were actually very hopeful with recent law changes that the refund process will be way, way less because of the timing of when you have to file for your assessment appeal. So theoretically, if they are quick enough, they can get the new values certified, handed to us, and we actually won't even have to issue refunds at the BPAR level because it would have already have occurred prior to the year.
Okay.
And so that would be just that one change by the county alone will hopefully free up a lot of our time, because it is very time consuming to issue refunds. We have to gather money from the library, from the school. The whole process is just, if we don't have refunds at all, that's great. So we're hoping that the change at the county level, I believe the deadline was October 30th for the appeals. I think even next year they're moving that back to September to give them even more time to certify values. So theoretically, we might have some refunds at the court level after BPAR, but it'd be way smaller than what we're seeing, as well as the recent court hearings that allowed the open window for 2 years. So we just had like a perfect storm of so many refunds that were going through as well. So a lot of our resources were allocated towards processing those.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then just one last question. This is maybe, are there any plans to integrate our taxes with these, with like, you know, online, like TurboTax type things so that you can just do it all with your federal and state?
So.
Or is that something?
Well, that's,
yeah.
so Jordan Tax Service actually collects earned income tax, which would be what TurboTax does for this.
Okay.
It's earned income that's state and federal. And so that's not something that the city has control over. That's
Okay.
Jordan. I know that they do have online filing, but it's sort of
It's
limited.
a separate, yeah.
You have to go into, and that's not going to change. You're still
Okay.
going to have to go through Jordan Tax Service, unfortunately.
To
That's
do
not
that.
something. Although the tax system, we're working on the real estate component of it, but there is a business tax component, which is already completed and operational. But once we have both components completed, the online portal will service both.
Okay.
And so the hope is to actually do online filing for any business taxes through the online portal. So
Okay.
that will be coming, you know, but it won't involve earned income tax.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the hard work over the year.
Sure,
You guys
thank
do
you.
a great job. Thanks.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we've been joined by Councilwoman Gross, and next I'll turn it over to Councilperson Charlin for any questions he might have.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and also very much want to thank our budget director, Pete McDevitt, for putting together this wonderful packet, and Finance Chair Strasburger for starting this process here. So I don't have a lot for finance. I think we've had an opportunity to talk in our discussions leading up to this about a lot of the questions that I had. One thing I do want to mention, I know that we've talked about the 3 TB change, but our budget for landscaping for finance properties is changing pretty dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
So can you, and I know we've talked about it before, but can you go through how that process is going to work and how we can tell residents that finance, which has a big role in cleaning up how overgrown our city is, that this will work better in 2025?
So first, I want to clarify that finance maintains only the properties owned by the 3 taxing bodies.
Right.
So if there are properties that are overgrown that are owned by private owner, that would have to be something that DPW would handle through like a clean and lean or 311 complaint. We are getting 200.
Which is another problem.
Which is a whole
Yeah,
other problem in
to-
itself, but
to
that's
be
not
fair.
something we,
Right.
But
But we do
when
own.
we
we
get
do own a good
complaints. We
bit
do.
of- yeah.
We do. So that being said, we are getting. I guess they did add $250,000 back in. The hope is to actually help potentially absorb some of that cost also through the 3 TB now that it's on a path to generating revenue instead of losing it. And the land care, we do have a land care coordinator who's actually actively looking at grants in order to help fund that also. And we do have some things out there to hopefully encourage people that want to volunteer to clean city property, to allow them to be on it and do that themselves. There has been an interest in, certain members of the community want to help keep their communities nice and clean and be on property in order to do that. But they would still have to ask permission because just entering city property is actually trespassing. So we're trying to put a path forward that would allow residents, if they so desired, to go and clean a property themselves to do so.
So
with the
one thing
permission
that
of the city.
I'm really adamant about is that we need to stop relying on volunteerism as a solution for how we're going to clean things up. I know that this is, I love the idea of community cleanups and all of those things, and I'm happy to participate when they happen. That cannot be our plan A.
It's not our plan A.
So the idea that we're making an easier pathway for someone to clean up a property, that's not neighbors' jobs. You don't become a resident in the city to also take on volunteer responsibility.
It's not plan A. But there have been requests that we couldn't honor specifically because we didn't have a path for somebody to be able to do that. So in order to provide that, and if they wanted to, it's there. But the objective is actually to have the 3TB help to actually fund and incur its cost in order to do that. Those ARPA funds existed in the general fund, but there used to be only $500,000, but it was $500,000 in the 3TB trust fund for land care specifically. So, but ARPA it allowed us to actually expand on that. And there still is $100,000 in the 3TB trust fund for land care, but we actually use it for tree service. So that part lies separately outside of the actual land care. But the objective is to migrate that back into the 3TB trust fund and take it out of the general fund.
When there's a 3TB tree situation, I found that the 3TB trees are as much of a touching a hot stove reaction as hearing the word paper street, where as soon as I hear that from the city, I'm like, we are going to have a lot of trouble here. We're going to have a lot of trouble cutting this tree down. Where forestry will come out very quickly, the 3TB trees are a nightmare. And usually at that point, I'm calling the churches in my district and asking if they have any volunteers that can cut a tree down, because that's going to be the faster effort there. What is the plan when we have a tree that needs cut down that is a 3TB tree?
So there would have to be a 311 request placed. Someone does go out and look and evaluate whether it needs to be cut down or not. To be clear, 3TB is not cutting down a tree unless it's a risk to someone's property or to someone's person. So if it's sitting in the middle of a lot and we feel like it's going to fall, but it's not actually going to damage property aside from our own, we're not cutting it. I mean, that's, to be honest, we have $100,000 for trees does not stretch very far.
No, it doesn't, yeah.
So it has to be a risk to public safety or to property. Most of the ones that we do respond to are ones that are actually falling and have fallen and are on someone's house or on someone's fence, that kind of thing. But we've had calls for people that don't like a tree because it has fruit. We're not cutting that one down. One that's on a hillside that if it falls, it's not going anywhere, we're not cutting that one down.
Sure.
So it just depends, but it has to be evaluated first before we'll even touch it unless it's an emergency situation.
I have found that when I have a tree situation, and this is a forestry tree, which that, Lisa and her team are fantastic, and Johnny on the spot on that I am often, we have better programs that if a tree falls on someone's house and, their roof is going to need repairs, we have better programs to repair the roof than to cut the tree down that will damage the roof. That is where we need to look first, is that, okay, well, this tree is going to fall down and it's going to damage your house. We've got money to repair your house, but we don't have money to stop the tree from falling on your house. That's, that is an issue that I've run into in the wet season, in the spring season. So, I would like to see more of an effort there. The last thing that I want to ask about, so we had issues in the past from the finance department with tax bills going out with the wrong dates on them. And I know that part of this is the migrating the system. We also had issues with people that paid their taxes by check, and the checks couldn't be cashed for months, and people were, concerned, did the city receive my check? I'm not sure what's going on here. And those continual errors that have happened that reflect on our professionalism as a city. And I just want to know that we're not going to run into that this year.
We don't plan on it.
Yeah.
And honestly, we never do. And when it has happened, it's been a perfect storm of craziness. So some of those issues were related to scanners breaking, because as you all know, we actually operate an on-site lockbox to process real estate tax payments. If those scanners break down at any point in time during the highest volume of the year, which is the very beginning, it causes an issue and a backlog. Although we do keep a lockbox open at PNC Bank as a fail-safe, just in case. So it remains dormant most of the year but it's there to reopen very quickly should we need it. So going forward, if these things were to happen, we do have fail-safes in place in order to help process payments so that people aren't waiting. I will tell you, though, that there is a slight delay in the beginning of the year, even if things are operating, just for the sheer volume of things that get pushed through. So it may not happen in 2 days, that your check shows up and it's cashed through your bank, but it might take a little bit longer than that. But it shouldn't take 4 weeks. So, but there will be it won't happen necessarily immediately, just for the mere fact that we have 4 staff that open the mail and push it through. But if you were to ever go down there at any point in time, it's not like you're gonna see things stacked up to the hilt waiting to be processed, so.
It's my concern is the user experience of neighbors living in Pittsburgh. And although in some ways it is more expensive to live in the city than in others, depending on your situation. I want to be able to provide a experience as a neighbor in Pittsburgh that is relative to the cost of living in the city. And so we have to make sure that things are streamlined and that we look like a professional world-class city. And these are things that we need to work on here.
Absolutely, we wholeheartedly agree.
Okay.
So.
All right, that's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and let the record reflect we've been joined by Councilman Wilson and Councilman Coghill. I'll turn it over to Councilwoman Gross next for any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here today and for this summary. I'm just going to recap a few of the things that I've heard since I've been sitting here. So we've covered, I think, a couple of times that there's been a dramatic increase in the property sales revenue from the 3TB, right? From decades of having a loss some years, and the trust fund being at zero. Even some years having the city taking money out of its operating funds and putting money into the 3TB trust fund because to do the kinds of maintenance that Councilman Charlin was just talking about. And now there's something like, how much is in there now?
There's over $1 million.
Over $1 million. Mm-hmm. And was that all accrued in 2024?
Not all, it's been a rolling balance, but I think.
But it was zero just.
It was zero.
A year or two ago, right?
Prior to COVID, we actually had to put money, we basically took the operating budget for the 3TB from the general fund and funded the 3TB with that every year. So, and since COVID, we cut that entirely. So it was either sink or swim time, basically. And we swam and not sank.
So, we've talked about this before too, but I just want to kind of get an update. The last numbers I've got at my fingertips, which isn't perfect, was that there were something like 83 properties sold in the 3TB, and that's just of June 2024.
That sounds about right. There's over 200 that are probably sales started. I think off the top of my head, I can't tell you how many we actually closed on. But I think last year, by the end of, we've exceeded already the number of sales that we have started for this year, like 3 months before the end of the year was where we ended last year. So like, let's say 200, we ended last year. We've already exceeded that in October.
Yeah.
So.
And we've talked about this before. The numbers I have at my fingertips are from my staff looking at Legistar, which is after the sale has been auctioned, but it's right before it closes because we have to vote on it and then it closes.
Yeah, we actually.
So there's just, basically my point is there's a lag, right?
There's
Like
a
we're
lag.
not, which years or which things. So
You
this
actually
is,
approve us to start a sale, so
To
those are
start
the
the
ones
sale.
that are started.
okay,
Yeah.
so at the lowest it was 12 properties in 2020 because again, that was COVID. But the year before that in 2019, it was only 24 properties
Right,
for the whole year.
yep.
That like came here in our packets, and it was just kind of going backwards. Only like 39 in 2018, only 50 in 2017. So there was a many years of just no properties moving at all.
I think we've exceeded the number of 24 in one piece of legislation.
Right, right. So those numbers are that you did these auctions both, and then 2023 wasn't that bad either. So it's been on the upswing. So congratulations, because I give
Thank
you the
you.
credit as director.
Can I make one more comment
Sure.
too? That these are actually properties that my team has started. The land bank and the URA transfers, they do their own legislation.
Yeah, I've got separate columns for those.
So,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
those are, we're talking just your
That's just
department,
yes.
right? Because we transferred 100 to the URA in 2023. But we don't know if those have sold or not, and we sold them for a
Right.
dollar, or what, $500 or something like that?
It's $2,200
Oh, that's
for
good.
a lot and $5,000 for a building.
Got
It's
it.
the same for the land bank.
Thank you. So we're doing that in addition to what the URA is doing, or what the land bank is doing.
Yep.
Your department
Yep.
is producing the money that's going into the 3TB that way. So thank you. And then, we all were kind of glad to hear that you are moving into what you call prior year taxes. I think the general public thinks of them as delinquent taxes. So I just wanted to make that vocabulary clear, right? And so your department also, for the first time in decades,
Yeah.
right, is collecting delinquent taxes.
Yes.
Ourselves, the city,
Ourselves.
your department is collecting
Yeah.
delinquent taxes. I just think that's like kind of revolutionary, right? for the couple of generations of Pittsburghers. And that I think I heard you say that you've gotten more payments.
Yes, so traditionally, when we use Jordan Tax Service as a third-party delinquent tax collector, we would stop collecting prior year tax by a certain date and then transfer all of those accounts, delinquent accounts, to them for collection. And we would only collect current year. Occasionally, there would be some prior year revenue that would come through on maybe an account that we kept for whatever reason, but it was very minimal, and only the prior year collections, most of them actually were the funds that they collected and then transferred to us. Since we did not do that, and we kept them in-house and only transferred the delinquent school portion, there was never a lag, and so people were able to continually pay, and which actually increased the number of payments that we actually were collecting. So just
am I
doing that on
hearing
its
that
own-
like that would mean there's less tax in dollars that is delinquent?
There should be, yes.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'm just making sure I'm understanding this, right? So there's more kind of properties that have had more payments, catch-up payments, and then so that has resulted in basically you having more revenue.
Right.
All right. So
Yep.
again, amazing, right? So because that was a big decision point to make, to be like, well, we've been using this outsourced private company for years, and other municipalities use them and our own school board uses them, but we're going to bring it in-house.
Yeah.
And by doing so, you've allowed people to make basically like installment payments because they have you to deal with as a department instead of having this third party to deal with, is the story I'm hearing.
Right, and also the third party charges a service fee. So the service fee goes to them, it doesn't come to us, and it just adds, like if you're already in the rears and you have to pay delinquent tax, it's not servicing our residents, then on top of it, have to pay a service fee as well. And it also takes longer because they get their service fee first and their out-of-pocket expenses first before we get any of the face tax that's owed to us.
So there was a lag built in.
Right.
Even if, let's say, the person was making the same installment payments to us and they were making them to Jordan, the city still wasn't getting the money.
Jordan's getting their money first.
They're getting, and sitting on it a little.
Right. It's taking us longer actually to recuperate what we actually lost because Jordan's getting their money first.
Got
right?
it.
So it's better for the residents. It's better for us. So we get to keep more of the revenue. We get to keep all of the revenue.
Right, and it's better. I'm interested to hear, if it's better on the residents' side as well. Again, dealing with the human beings in the finance department, because I definitely heard stories from residents about the calls that they got from Jordan Tax, and those were usually unpleasant exchanges. So well done with that as well. And then the third thing, which again is like. You talked about decreasing the turnaround on the rebates by working with the county. And so like kind of what you said, you decreased that time from like kind of what to what, do you think?
So we have yet to see that. The county has made a few law changes recently on how they process the appeals at the BPAR level. And so we're expecting we're expecting the decisions to be made hopefully before the values are actually certified, which cuts out one entire section of refunds. At least that's what we're anticipating. So we're sort of watching and seeing because this is a new change. So I believe the time to appeal your assessment was October 31st, I believe. And so theoretically, if they get all the assessed values changed in time for the certification, which is I believe January 15th, the values are changed. We don't even have to worry about a refund at the BPAR level, if that makes sense. So we're hoping that refunds in general drastically reduce. The appeals may stay the same, but they'll change the value before we even actually send out bills.
Got it.
And then therefore there won't be a refund
it.
to issue in the
Got
first
it.
place.
So that makes life more efficient for you and definitely more efficient for the residents.
I will add to that though, that the way the process works now or had in the past is that they would send a file to someone's email and then that person would have to pick up that file and manually have our tax system like ingest it in order to change the assessed value in the tax system and then generate a refund. That process in itself is not only cumbersome, but it's also dangerous because if it's only going to one person and that person is there or they leave, which is actually what has happened, then that file sits there and nothing happens to it. So Ian's been able to work with our counterparts at the county in order to put those files in a place that's accessible to more than one person so that the current system in its current form works
Has some
more
redundancy
efficient.
and yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
And we've worked with our partners at IMP and the data, so we're having a lot more conversations with other departments within the city. Like even when it comes to planning, certain types of files related to the deletion of parcels or subdivisions. We'll actually have a conversation tomorrow with a group to help us explain the front end of it, which causes these changes that then filters through the county and then comes back to us. So we're trying to almost front run some of these things where we've had problems where value changes have happened or how our current antiquated system's operating and even moving into the new system. So there's a lot of little complexities that we're trying to really dig into. And the county's been very helpful in answering a lot of our questions, and they're modernizing at the same time, and law changes are happening, and so something's out of our control. So we're just trying to monitor a lot of fronts. So
Sure, I won't take time here, but I've definitely experienced some of the conversations. We go from department to department, and people are like, well, we don't, the parcel number is coded differently in this software than that software, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's, I'm glad that we're getting past that, like 10-year stalemate of this, we can't upload your files into our files, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you. I think I wanted one last question, which was maybe too big for this meeting, but since you are the collector of taxes, it is budget. I'm trying to say budget germane, because our finance chair asked us yesterday to not talk about operations, but we're talking about budget germane questions here, is that we all know as county residents that eventually a reassessment's happening. And we know we've put new systems in place, and we've had this transition year of transitioning systems. So have you anticipated this new reassessment process in kind of the building of your systems?
It automatically accounts for it. I mean, every year we bill from the county's records.
Okay.
So
that assessment value isn't something
it's not something we
separate.
generate. Nope. And at the beginning of every year, they actually
It's like a
send
data.
us,
It's just a data file.
it's a data dump, right? They give us the information with their certified assessed values. We plop it into our system, and that's how we generate the tax liabilities and bill.
Okay. So the work's all on them.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a really good budgetary answer.
Right. So
Yes.
for us, right. So for us, there shouldn't be any different. We shouldn't be processing anything different. The work is on their side. That they're the keepers of the assessed value, and we just take what they hand us. That's
Excellent.
That's all there is to it.
Good to know. Good to
And
know.
to
Okay,
add to that a little bit, so
Sure.
we have these year-end files that set the value for the future year, and these value change files are sort of what I was talking about earlier, which change based on some action that causes it, whether it be a hearing,
subdivision,
building permit.
appealing.
There's a whole
Catastrophic loss.
loss.
Yeah.
There's a whole variety of them, and we're monitoring how they change things. But our intention in the new system is to have those data points drop directly into some sort of repository, so we can run reports directly out of them. So we can A, reconcile, and B, run a report if anyone were to ask us how many partial exemptions were granted, how many,
That's what I want to know.
whatever it may be. We're trying to think ahead. So we do have ways to go with the system, but we are having these conversations internally. One favorable thing is because the business tax system has launched, we already have some tried and true methods when it comes to reporting, and it's kind of actually fun. So if you ever want to talk in the weeds, I'm happy. So.
Ooh, my God, you just opened the door. I'm going to be down at your office as soon as the meeting ends. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Thank you. We'll move now to Councilman Wilson for any questions he might have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I missed the initial overview. So there's one position being added. Which one is that? Is that the tax compliance?
I don't think there's any positions being added.
What's plus one from 2024 then?
Oh, let me take a look at that. That might just be an error on my part.
I think it was just, I think this is part of a mid-year swap. So some of our positions are paid from the 3TB, and some of them are paid from the general fund, and some of them have splits between the two based upon whatever it is kind of work that they do.
Okay.
I think we eliminated a position that had partially been funded by the 3TB, but now it resides completely in the general fund. So we didn't add a position. We have the same number of employees, but I think it changed the salary distribution between the two accounts, if that helps make sense.
Yeah, what she said.
And some of the position swaps also, we took a position from our business tax group and moved it to, actually we're able to create two out of real estate because we recognized we had some issues with our billing, as well as with the new, to answer some, this goes with a few questions that have come up. We're anticipating our department needing to change how we operate a little bit due to the new system. And so we actually had a couple more positions at a higher level that can help with our managers when it comes to processing all these various actions, whether it be selling properties, whether it be refunds, whether it be doing critical analysis of our
Okay.
new system.
And, you know, in terms of, I'm going to get back to the 3TB stuff, but okay, so it's not just, so the budget doesn't go up. It's actually a savings of 20,000.
Yeah, through the swaps, it's a
Okay.
net decrease.
And then the taxes. I know that yesterday, Peter, you highlighted the amount of. There was a lot of conversation here about, you know, how we moved away from Jordan tax and how it's in house now. And what was the number you said that we're?
I said it was like 4 times the
Four
amount than
yeah.
what we were bringing in before. I think it jumped from 3 million to like 12 million, crushing it.
And it's four times the amount of
Prior year tax.
prior year tax.
Prior year tax, which is what Jordan collected only. So they collected prior year delinquent tax.
And what would you say the number one reason why we're getting better at it?
Not that we're getting better at
Or
it,
that
but we
why we're
actually
better
get to
at it
keep,
than
right, so,
previously contracted Jordan tax?
well, we're able to realize like more, we're able to collect more on the delinquent phase tax as opposed to like when a person would pay Jordan tax. Jordan they're also tacked on service fees and out-of-pocket expenses. Jordan reimburses themselves for that first and then applies whatever's left to the phase tax and penalty and interest that's owed to us. So because we're not using them, when someone pays, they pay directly to us and they're not paying a service fee, so it's going against the actual liability that's owed. So
And-
we're
and that-
realizing the money that's owed to us faster by collecting it ourselves than
Okay.
allowing a third party to do it.
Thank you. And that, those extra costs and how they're, you know, they pay themselves first, that was equaling out to 4 times. That's what the 4 times amount is. Like those service costs equals out to 4 times.
The service fee is at least 2%, so and then there's other, you know, lien filing costs and things too that add on top of that.
Yeah.
So 2% every time, I mean, it very well could.
Okay.
Plus the fact that as I explained before, we would actually stop collecting at a certain point and transfer then anything that was delinquent to Jordan for collection. The fact that we did not do that sort of kept the lines open and people were able to continually keep paying.
Okay.
So, and they're paying without extra fees. So if
So-
it were me, I would be more enticed to keep paying too if I wasn't being tacked on extra charges on top of it. So
Okay.
it's allowing somebody to get right.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And
It's,
so so would you say there's more people paying now, or the same number amount, just it's cheaper for them to pay?
I don't know if it's more people paying, but we're able to collect more. So we're
Gotcha.
realizing more and collecting
Yeah.
more of that due liability. I don't know if it's numbers or volume of people that are doing it, or if it's the same people that are doing it and we're just seeing more of it because they're not keeping part of the money for themselves to cover their own expenses, and we're just get to keep all of it.
And how much money are we talking about? Like with the 4 times amount, what is that?
12 million?
12 million sounds about right, but it's hard, when I look and see it, all I see is the negative, which is actually offset by refunds,
Yeah.
which are mostly due to prior year taxes and changes in assessment from a prior year. But being able to collect all those funds is actually helping to offset that expense.
So 12 million more per year, or just a bulk
I think that's what we've collected this year.
This year.
this
So,
year?
I don't know if we'll be able to keep up that pace, because if they catch up
12
enough,
million
then-
more from back taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Last year we collected
Okay.
3
Okay.
million. This year we got 12.
That's helpful. That's a capital project. That's a few different capital projects. All right. And then appreciate the discussion that we were talking about. I know Councilwoman Gross brought up, and it's been something we've been talking about in terms of the sales that you've been able to accomplish at the finance department. And so I just brought up the sheet that you had shared with me, and that it was for the numbers you gave me were for this year from January to
September.
End of September. Yeah.
Yep.
And so it is interesting, and I could share that. We could share this with everyone at this table. But it is an interesting discussion because the sales completed are for in the reserve. The total was 191, and so when we talk about all that money that goes into the 3TB, it's an interesting scenario because. So you all were saying that you're doing better. There's 77 that you've sold.
Mm-hmm.
And what were like prior years? Like for, what was that, 9 months? It had to be an estimate.
Well, last year, so we've already exceeded the number of sales started
Yeah.
that we finished with last year. So that just gives you an idea. And last year was a pretty good year as well. So it's been on an upward trajectory ever since like 2022. Prior to that, I think Councilwoman Gross said that we completed 24, maybe prior to COVID. COVID, there was 10, and that might even be stretching it because the courts were closed, which inhibit, we weren't capable then of quieting title, which then we couldn't transfer property. That's a necessity on our end to be able to complete a sales process. So there were very few. But, so this is sort of, we haven't seen sales like this. Honestly, I can't speak to, way in the past, but from my recollection, it's never been this high.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then, so that's 77 for you, and then the URA is 34, and then the land bank is 71. So, it's a pretty good split, and there's reserve of 9. So where does that reserve of 9 fit into?
So this.
The
prior
numbers
to-
are relevant. I'm
all
just
right.
curious.
Prior to the land bank, the
Yeah.
city used to operate a property reserve for community development corporations.
Right.
The reserve is now defunct, but there were a number of sales that had been started and were being held in the property reserve that the land bank was actually helping us to clear title for
Right.
and to get those properties out and gone and into the hands of the CDCs. What you're seeing are the leftovers of those after the title's been quieted, and we're finally able to close on those properties. And some of them, actually, the land bank, the CDC decided to give to the land bank, so the land bank had completed the sale. But there are no more like property reserve properties, only the ones that were left over that the sales need to be completed as part of, this cooperation with the land bank.
Yeah, no, it's a good success story on both ends, So I appreciate the collaboration. And so, yeah, that total of 191 definitely fills, that 3TB fund to do some, because I know that, like at the land bank, we see the cost to the city or the payment to the city. So structure, like you said, 5, and a lot 22.
Mm-hmm.
Now, currently the strategy at the land bank is to acquire property until the 3TB agreement is finalized. Or really I can't remember it's actually called something else. Like there is I don't know.
It's a
but basically-
cooperation agreement
Yeah,
between
the
the three taxing
intergovernmental
bodies.
cooperation agreement is the technical term. That, until that's done and we have full agreement on what's going to happen at the sheriff's sale, the land bank has been utilizing the treasurer's sale, just like, everyone, to figure out which properties could come through. And whenever that happens, can you just help us understand how the finance department, like until we get that agreement in place, how the finance department could be, a good partner in making sure that that process is happen smooth, like as quickly as possible.
For the
that-
treasure sale?
Yeah, like once they're in the treasure sale, and then the deeds have to be filed.
So the treasure sale is a really long process.
Yeah.
So once a treasure sale occurs, it takes a court action for a judge to certify a sale before we can even take properties into inventory. And before that can happen, there's a redemption period of 90 days. So the owner of the property that we put in the sale has 90 days to cure whatever they owe to the city is the upset price, which we have to set by law. And the upset price is any municipal outstanding taxes or municipal liens that's owed to the city. They have 90 days in which to do that. And then after that, are we only able to turn that over to the courts in order for a judge to certify? So that could take a long time. And so for us, it's a legal process, not necessarily one that we have a lot of control over changing or even making better, because it's not something that lies within our realm. But actually, once that happens, then we are able to certify, or once the sale is certified, then the deeds, the law department usually drafts the deeds or treasurer's deeds, and we get them out. And so, and the land bank, once we take them into inventory, anybody can purchase property from us. The land bank actually they don't quiet title so that they could, ask for a concurrence, and we could give them to them, draft their deed, and they would quiet title on their own. But I don't know, if there's something else you're looking for.
Yeah, I
or,
was just wondering, it's separate from this, but we could probably I can have a better understanding of if there's an option for people that are paid in the budget for 3TB to, be I guess I need to understand more just how much they're in the mix of with the treasure sale, because that seemed like a good option for those employees to be have a better partnership with how since the bulk of the properties, not the bulk, but half, over half of the properties are being funded by the in that 3TB fund, or moving away from the finance department, how we can just try to just make sure that the properties aren't sitting at the finance department longer than they have to, so that we can dispose of them at the land bank.
Well, currently, we don't take properties unless we actually have an end use for them. So, and the actual Jordan contract, prohibited us from just inadvertently, throwing properties into a treasure sale. So we would only put a tax delinquent property in the treasure sale if someone actually approached us to purchase it, or a CDC or a council member or the land bank or the URA needed the property for site acquisition and requested that we put it in a T-sale to take. So currently, we're not taking any property that we're not expected to dispose of immediately following. In the past is where the problem lies, where we would do what they would call a revenue sale, where we would just take any property that was delinquent and throw it in the T-sale, and it could be hundreds of properties, and they wouldn't go, and then we would absorb them. The city also does not have to take property at the T-sale if it doesn't want to. So if we put a property in the T-sale and you want us to actually put it in there so that you could purchase it, and by purchase it, I mean either come and bid on it at the sale, or you could take a risk that we would take it into inventory and then try to purchase it from us after that. But we don't actually have to take properties. So if we put them in the sale and nobody bids on them, there is no law stating that the city actually has to take those properties into inventory. We could just choose not to. So,
Is that being done? Are you currently doing that? Choosing which ones come in, come
we
which
don't,
ones
because the only ones that are currently going in are ones that are being requested by someone to actually purchase. So if they don't come and buy it or attempt to bid on it at the sale, we do take it in with the anticipation of starting a sale once we retain ownership of the property through the 3TB. Does that help answer
Yeah,
your
yeah,
question?
yeah. I was curious about that.
Yeah,
All right, thanks a lot.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. We'll now move to Councilman Coghill for any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. How are you?
Morning.
Good, good. I'll be brief. I don't have too much, but I just want to, I know we talked about Jordan a couple times here. So what I just affirm what I heard you say is we decided to take on that tax collecting on our own. We don't know if we're doing better as to, people paying their taxes, but we know we're making more money because we're not paying those fees.
Yep.
So with Jordan, I got a lot of complaints with Jordan about just pressure. You're right. I mean, their job is that they're going to get taxes, and they send people, I don't want to say threatening, but, letters and of that nature that just kind of put pressure on them. How are we, what's our process? Are we sending them the same type of letter, or are we just hoping they pay, or?
Well, so this being the first year, actually, we are getting ready, now that we're sort of getting to year's end, to actually send a letter out stating that we do have your account now that had been at Jordan. So those people that maybe hadn't been paying, they do know, and to offer them to say, hey, if you want to get on a payment agreement with us, like here's an application for you to fill out, mail to us, and someone will be in contact with you to try to work out an agreement to help you satisfy what you owe in the past.
Yeah, so it's
I
safe to
will
say
say-
we have a much nicer way of collecting.
That's the intent. I will say, look, to be honest, I get a lot of complaints because around this time of year, we do send current year delinquent tax out because,
I mean, you got to. Right?
and it does say, we tried to soften the language this year,
Yeah,
at least
right,
because we're not including Jordan in the comments, but, if we could take action against you if you don't pay.
Sure.
And nobody likes that, but it is the truth and people need to know. And the action is, we could put you in the treasurer's sale. So
yeah.
doesn't mean that we're going to, but you have to at least alert people that these are the consequences if this doesn't happen.
Right. Well, I'm glad we have a more friendly collecting. I don't know if that's going to result in less taxes being collected or not, but just eliminating the fees alone, even if we didn't get the same amount of people, ponying up on their delinquent taxes, that we're getting all the chunk of money out of it.
Right,
So.
and just to clarify, it's something that you said concerning the fees, when somebody paid, they paid the fees to Jordan, like we
Right.
don't ever see them, they don't come to us, we only get what's left over
So
after
with
their
so
out-of-pocket is paid.
just using numbers, say if somebody's $10,000 back on their taxes, okay, Jordan would try to collect. Say they collected 2,500 of that 10,000, that goes right to their fees first before we see anything, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And we had no problem, distributing and mailing out, and there's no headaches or has caused any chaos in your department.
Not yet,
Okay, right.
but it has been a little confusing at times, only because there's some nuances,
Sure.
with liens and things like that, and penalty and interest that we've had to deal with sort of on a, one-by-one basis, but overall, we haven't really had any complaints, so.
Right. Well, I'm glad, again, that we have a friendlier way of collecting. That bothers me with PLI. They always send a letter, and I always say, you got to change that verbiage in there. It says, you will be fined $1,000 a day for the rest of your life. And people start panicking, and, it's like, are we really going to hold them to that? Probably not. Do we have to put it in there for legal purposes? I don't know, but I don't know.
We might have,
Yeah,
we might have to,
I understand there
Just-
has to be some sort of I don't want to say threat,
sitting
but
in my
yeah,
chair, I
right.
have to make the public aware that if you don't do A, B, and C,
Yeah, you
that
could
the
be taken to court.
consequences are C, D, and E, right? So,
Right. I mean, it's just part of the,
yep.
part of what what you have to do. So I understand that, but I'm glad that collection has gone better. I don't know about more people, but we're getting more money in return. So that's a bonus without dealing with Jordan at all. I know a lot of people were concerned and afraid that, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to collect a third of what Jordan does. But so it's good to hear that, whether it's just in the way of cash or amount of people, that we're not only keeping pace, but ahead of what we've done with Jordan.
Well, I think the objective is not to just make it better financially for the city, but also to be a better service to our residents,
Yeah,
right?
no doubt, no doubt.
So-
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let's see. When so we passed a couple of weeks ago to kind of direct the administration to sell our municipal courts building. Is that coming? Is that in your purview? No.
I think the finance director is mentioned in the legislation.
Okay. And I know there's phone calls that need, there's things that need to be worked out, probably before it comes to you. You don't have it, you're not putting a price tag on it at this point.
No,
Right.
my only role is,
Yeah.
I'm the city's landlord.
Gotcha,
So
right.
that's the only role of the finance department.
Right.
So
right. So when
any-
it comes to the transaction itself,
The
whether it be to
nuances-
the state or to the county or whomever,
Yep,
that's where you come in. You don't think or negotiate the price of it, because this
Nope.
is an odd situation. So
Nope.
it
I
really
sign
is.
the
Okay, good.
document.
That's
that
good to
would
know.
Turn
Right.
it over to
Good.
someone else.
Great.
That's
Great
my
deal.
only role.
Great deal. Okay, I want to talk about the process when you said, so for instance, I'll give you 3 examples of my own homes that were in and around me, and I just knew nobody lived there forever, but they were not owned by the city. And I think this is what you were talking to Councilman Wilson about. I went through the process, so I'm very familiar with it. First of all, again, it's like, well, who do you call? How do you try to buy this house, right? I contacted an attorney. My attorney came and he said, well, let's look into it. And we found, here's what I did, and let me just ask you if it's the same way today. We inquired about it through the city. Sure enough, they're back on taxes. There is nobody there. We don't know who to contact, basically. So my attorney put out, I guess they were directed by city, kind of our procedure, put out, we have to put something out to the heirs of that property owner. And I think we had to wait, I want to say 30 days, maybe even more, to see if we had a response. After we didn't get a response, then it was free to pursue. It cost me $5,000 just to get it downtown, basically, and get it in a bidding process. But with the assurance that if I put up the $5,000, whoever buys that property, that money comes right back to me. And that's the way it was with me. It still is that way, right?
Yeah, so the city actually would handle, so let's say there's a house next door to you and you want to buy it, whether you want to fix up the house or you just want the house property, whatever. And you look and you see it's privately owned and it's not owned by the city.
Right.
And you call in and we tell you that it's tax delinquent.
Right.
We would have you fill out a form to request to put that
Right.
put that property through the treasurer sale process.
Right.
And it could take a while depending on where we are with the next treasurer sale coming up, because there's a lot of work that goes into actually preparing a property to be placed in the sale. And we actually on our end would do that. We would reach out to, when we start that process, we would reach out to any of the other authorities, like the water department,
Right.
PLI, DPW, to see if they have any outstanding,
Right.
liens, Jordan, tax liens, that kind of stuff. Once we determine that there are and enough, and we start developing what they would call an upset price,
Yep.
we advertise to the owners and any of their heirs that we're able to track down that we're
Oh,
placing
so you
the
did that
property.
process. My attorney
We
didn't do that.
ad-
You did that.
We
Okay.
would do that.
Okay,
We
I
do
didn't-
that.
I
We
wasn't- I couldn't
advertise
remember,
it,
yeah.
And we give them an opportunity to come in and cure
Right.
anything that's owed to
Yeah,
us.
they come and
before
pay
it
up
goes-
and, yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if not,
Right.
or they don't, or nobody seeks some kind of court action to stop that property from going to sale on the day of the sale, then it goes up for bid and it goes to the highest bidder.
The 3 properties that I'm referring to, I didn't end up with any of them because I didn't like the were the prices. But the upset cost was all the taxes, delinquent taxes. That one particular one was $30,000.
Yep.
And it starts at $30,000. And it could be just a luck of the draw. I thought, I'm going to get this for $30,000 is what I thought. But it ended up going above and beyond what I was willing to pay for it. But the interesting, the thing that I like about that, and I didn't do this for that reason, but those properties were going nowhere. And nobody, unless you as a private or a neighbor or somebody who's interested in that property, they're just sitting there. You're not going to actively try to put this on the market.
Nope.
So I take a lot of pride in the fact that, because these were around me and nobody knew, is that at least got them to sale, even though they ended up in my hands. Somebody ended up in somebody's hand, and somebody's paying taxes on it and everything else. You said the city can't take that action like a private, like I did.
So I think we have to talk about two different processes too, because there's also sheriff's sale. And the city can take something if it's tax delinquent,
Right.
but if it isn't, we can't do anything with it,
Right.
which is where you get these dead end, what we would
Right,
consider to be dead end properties, where they're not being kept, they're blighted, but somebody's maybe paying the taxes on them, or maybe somebody isn't, but we don't necessarily want them, because that means we have to take them into inventory and pay for them. And we don't, and that's an issue all on its own, right? So we try to limit what we bring in, especially if we know that it's not gonna go.
Like if we were to take that in, we would have to pay the school tax,
We have to pay
we have to pay the back taxes on it.
no, we don't
Oh,
pay
okay.
no. But we still have to, like, maintain it
Right,
potentially,
right,
or,
Yeah.
we have holding costs and
Sure.
things like that.
Right.
But here's where the land bank is a good partner,
Mm-hmm.
because the land bank, especially with dead end properties, has powers
Mm-hmm.
unto them that could allow them to take blighted properties. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why there's sort of like, there's us, and there's the URA, and there's the
Yeah.
land bank, and everybody has specific roles
Right.
and powers
Right.
that actually help to conquer the issue as a whole.
Yeah, that's good. I'm really happy the land bank's going in the right direction, and I hope it could fill voids that you couldn't do. That's great. Okay. One last thing is, you have 40 people in the department?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. How many of the 40 are in town working every day or working from
All of
home?
us,
Oh,
every
good,
day.
good.
We have since
Great.
July of '21.
I'm glad to hear that. That's great.
And in fact, there were a small group of us that came in during shutdown.
Yeah.
We worked to put money in the bank and process payments so that we didn't have to borrow money.
And I'm not saying that people can't work from home. I don't begrudge that, depending on the job, I guess. But it all comes back to traffic, people downtown, people going to Starbucks, buying a cup of coffee, whatever. It's just healthy to have everybody downtown, I feel. So I'm really glad to hear that about
Yeah,
your department.
they're
yeah.
in there full time.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
work from home
Right.
is a privilege, and at
Right.
times it helps our department.
Right.
If something happens, someone has an emergency, and they're able to work from home, and we're able to actually provide that to make our employee happy, and it benefits
Sure.
us, but it's not part of our normal schedule. Everybody's in there 5 days a week, 8 hours a day.
Very good. I'm really, really glad to hear that. And that's really it for me. I just want to say I think you guys do a great job, what you've been doing, Jennifer. You've been at it for a long time now, right?
24 years?
Right. Okay, yeah, that's it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank
Thanks.
you. I appreciate it. So I'll just take a little bit of time because I know that we have another a couple of departments to cover after this. So first I want to say, having sat on the Joint Financial Task Force throughout this year, I have a new appreciation for what the Department of Finance does and the intricacies of your work, and particularly around budget forecasting. Learned a lot more than I ever wanted to know about
It
budget
keeps me up at night, to be honest.
I'm sure it does. So thank you. I mean, just a new appreciation. I want to give a big thank you to you and your team.
Thank you.
And I know that for the last year, we've all heard and read about the different stressors on our finances, and that you have worked very closely with OMB to revise our revenue forecasts and find offsetting cutbacks as necessary. So I know that we all know the sources of concern. We've talked about them. I want to know what your areas of cautious optimism are.
So, given the fact that there's been changes with interest rates, I'm hoping that we actually, even though we probably forecasted less sales for a property, I would hope to see an increase in that. I wouldn't guarantee it, but it would be nice.
Home sales?
Home sales,
Residential.
which would increase our deed transfer tax. I don't want to put a lot of stock in that because a lot can happen.
Of course.
But I'm hoping it seems to be headed in that direction, and I hope to see that. So
I do too. And then last, was there anything else you wanted to add to that answer?
no, and just for, I mean, I think when we forecasted, we may have doomed and gloomed it a little bit, but I think I would feel more comfortable erring on the side of caution as opposed to being extremely optimistic, just so that we're prepared. I would rather have things say it's going to be bad and turn out better, and be better for it, than go, yay, and then
Prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
that's exactly it. So,
Understood.
and I think our forecast tried to reflect a lot of that, so.
Absolutely. My last question is pretty small, but can you explain for the public the rationale behind shifting the funds from the pension contribution to additional pension fund?
So our actuaries, and I guess this is actually a trend currently, during their evaluation, reduced our MMO payment. But instead of reducing the overall contribution by a lot, I mean, it decreased by a lot. I think we really want to have a healthy pension. We've done a lot of work on the pension end we're actually over 70% funded right now, which is kind of pretty historic. I mean, when I became assistant director, like about 6 years ago, we were 50, and we thought that was amazing because it had been so low. So in order to keep that healthy and growing, I think the objective was maybe to reduce the overall cost a little and add. So since we weren't making a larger MMO payment, we sort of shifted some of that money then into the additional payment to meet or exceed the actuarial recommended contribution. So
Okay.
in order to make sure the pension is healthy.
Great. Congratulations on the pension levels
Thank
as well.
you.
I want to let the record reflect that we've been joined by Councilman Mosley. We are just about to shift over to Department of Law, but if there are any burning questions that you have, Councilman, now's your time.
I'll watch the video. I'll get on YouTube. I just don't want to ask a question that's already been
Understood.
belabored,
Thank you. I
so
appreciate
thank
that.
you for coming.
Well, with that, we'll let you go. Thank you for your budget, for participating in the budget hearings and your presentation and answering our questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. So now I'd like to invite those from the Law Department to join us at the table, and I'll ask that Budget Director Mick Devitt give us a brief overview.
Sure, thank you, Councilperson. The mission for the Department of Law, it provides legal advice and serves as in-house corporate counsel to the City of Pittsburgh, which often involves providing advice to the mayor, city directors, city council, and various governmental units. It represents the city in all legal aspects of its daily governmental functions. It also represents the city in high-profile cases significantly impacting public policy and city residents' quality of life. The Department of Law operates as a quality, proactive, boutique law firm attracting talented young professionals with impeccable integrity from the public and private sector. A quick overview.
Must have wrote that.
Straight out of the budget. A quick overview. The Department of Law is divided into several general services areas or divisions as follows: federal litigation, state litigation, labor and employment, general municipal, claims, and open records officer. a quick position summary. There is a total of 40 full-time positions in the general fund, which is the same as 2024. And one update is there is an upgrade of a solicitor 1 to an assistant solicitor 2. Assistant solicitor 1 to an assistant solicitor 2. Overall, there's a $47,616 decrease, or increase, my apologies. And a quick summary of the non-personnel changes. Overall, there's a $6.3 million decrease. That comes from a $560,000 decrease in professional and technical services, a $600,000 decrease in legal fees, and a $5.8 million decrease in judgments. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Director McDevitt. Now, if you all would like to introduce yourselves and present any information you'd like for us.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Krisha Kubiak. I am the Solicitor and Chief Legal Officer.
Good morning. I'm Jesse Exlis, and I'm the Deputy City Solicitor.
Good morning. I'm Denora Santillan, and I'm the Fiscal and Contracting Coordinator.
Do have a brief presentation. Good morning to the esteemed members of Council. Thank you for allowing me to appear today to present the Law Department budget for 2025. I also want to extend my thanks to Council Member Strasburger, who is chair of the Finance and Law Committee, and for all of you and your staffs for attending the meetings to discuss our lawsuits and settlements. Your interest and attention to these cases has been instrumental to the success of this year. I'd like to also specifically thank all of your staffs, including the clerk's office. They are all great to work with, and they are dedicated public servants who have the best interests of the city at heart. I'd like to thank my team here that's helped me present, Jesse and Denora. Lawyers are historically bad with numbers, so the great strides we have made this year in tracking our budget and paying vendors on time is pretty much all due to Denora. I'd also like to thank my entire team, and specifically the lawyers that dedicate their careers to the people of the city of Pittsburgh. I've worked with a lot of lawyers in my career, and I am constantly impressed by the skill, intelligence, and professionalism of the lawyers that make up the city law department. We'll get into this more later in the presentation, but they have successfully won numerous motions to dismiss and motions for summary judgment this year, which leads to cases being dismissed without any payments by the city. Their diligence makes a huge difference for city taxpayers. The attorneys who've had cases dismissed completely this year include John DeMarco, Julie Corin, Hillary Weaver, Jules Tyndall, Mary Ann Diani, Kevin Frater, Juan Rivera, and Irene Thomas. Thank you so much to all of them. With respect to the law budget, the changes are primarily in less money that's allocated to the judgments and legal fees accounts. As to background, judgments is not just when our team proceeds to a trial and the trial determines that the city owes money to the plaintiff. We also use that account to pay settlements on those cases and claims, which is when people file a claim for some damage that the city caused, and we make payments without the need for a lawsuit or a trial. At this point, we created a short PowerPoint to help set this up. So is that what's up?
Yeah, that's
Yep.
what's up.
All right, let's go to the first slide. There's only 3 slides. Because again, lawyers aren't good at PowerPoint either. All right, so this is our settlements and claims for the years of 2020 through 2024. The yellow bars are our general settlements and judgments, kind of all of the cases that get settled within a year. The dark blue bars on the bottom are the claims. So that, for those of you that have been here for a while, that's a Margaret Vitale work, and the work that she does in that area, and that's a pretty steady amount every single year. I want to raise your attention to the gray bars, because those gray bars highlight specific large judgments that we had. So the first one was before my time, but that is the Leon Ford case. And that was the last payment that was made on that case. And then the 2 major payments that were made last year and this year, although the last one hasn't been paid yet, but will be paid before the end of the year, is for the Jim Rogers case. We also have a little sliver of an amount in there too that council's already voted on and has been reserved in JDE, although it's still awaiting a court decision, but that's the Fern Hollow case. So I wanted to point this out because the numbers on the budgets kind of swing pretty wildly, But part of that reason is because of these large cases. Once we settled Fern Hollow, we don't have any further large cases currently on, the docket. And of course, I can't get into a lot of the details, but I will say one of the standards that I use is calculable and reasonable. Like, do we know? There's certainly cases we have. It is possible that we will pay a lot of money on them, but at the same time, we don't know that at this point, and they're still early enough in the cases that we can't plan for it. So that's the settlements and claims bucket. The second bucket is this is what we paid out. Again, the budget kind of varies a lot, but this is the actually amount that went out the door. This does not include encumbered funds, but this is outside council fees. Some of the times, first of all, some of the dips is due to COVID. Once COVID happened, the courts took a long time to get back kind of in the swing of things, and then they kind of went into overdrive because they really wanted to work through, and I do want to shout out the Allegheny County Courthouse right now because they've been working very hard to make up for what happened over pandemic. It's also part of the reason that we have more judgments and settlements these last couple of years, because we're kind of cleaning out that what happened in 2020. But the outside counsel fees from last year, a lot of that had to do with the Jim Rogers case again, because we had separate counsel for many of the officers that had been accused because it was in conflict with the city's position. And we still do have a pending case. We have a trial coming up called the DeLucas case that some people know of, occurred at the Copies Bar. That also has multiple outside counsel. So that's the two reasons. That case will be over the beginning of January, and so, or the middle of January. So we expect that the large payments we've had to make currently, we don't have any other cases that have kind of fall into that bucket currently. Now, again, it doesn't mean we won't get one tomorrow. But I do want to give some kind of context to some of the larger numbers here. And then the last slide. This has been a new emphasis that we have worked on through the city, which is every meeting we call out the attorneys that have closed a case without having to pay any money. Some of them are through motions in motions court, especially in the federal court. We've won a significant number of motions for summary judgment and motions to dismiss, which we're really proud of. And even in the state court cases, we've won some motions for summary judgment. We've also just done a diligent work of our discovery to determine that, the case against the city is very weak, and so people have agreed to get us out of settlements. Like, the case has settled and other parties have paid the plaintiffs, but it hasn't been the city. So this is the list of all of the cases that have closed in the last year without any money being paid. And I'm proud that that's a lot of legal work. It doesn't look like a lot of legal work, but it's a lot of legal work to get to that case. And that is part of what we've been doing to kind of maintain our judgments in a reasonable manner. That is all I have, and please, happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, and I'm obviously just taking over for a couple minutes here, and we're going to make sure that I'm following procedure here. Peter, did you have anything else further to add before we go to members?
No.
All right, so we're going to go to Councilperson Warwick. You have any questions?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. It's been lovely working with you and your team over the past year. I was curious just about, because I know it's sort of been a topic among members and also probably for the public. I'm curious about how things are going in terms of, and I know you can't get into the details, but just in terms of pursuing the property taxes for nonprofits.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. Let me discuss what has been made public, because whatever has been made public is certainly free to share at this point. there was a long delay. We filed in 2023 the challenges, and then we got the first round of answers from the county by August of 2023. Out of those, we won half, we lost half. And then some of those parties filed appeals, we filed additional appeals. The issue came that the Board of Property Assessment, it took a long time to get those cases scheduled for hearing. So those cases have just been scheduled for hearing in this month and next month. We have 5 more that are scheduled for December 18th, and then all of the 2023 cases will have had a hearing. Once they have a hearing, and we did just hear from some of our appeals, and that we have lost at that board property, but we have filed an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. So we are moving towards the Court of Common Pleas on some of those cases as well. So it took longer than we expected, but we are getting to a place where it is going to speed up significantly. At this point, this year, all of those hearings were held by counsel that were in the city of Pittsburgh, so we have not used outside counsel at all for the last 7 or 8 months on any of these cases.
Do we have any idea of sort of, and I don't know if do we tally sort of time spent,
Internally?
Internally, yeah, like
We
value
don't.
of time spent. Okay.
I'll say one of the appeals of working at the city law department is that you don't have to bill time. And so we certainly keep track and make sure everybody's working and they're working a 40-hour week and keeping busy and that they have a full workload, but we don't travel specific time. They are doing that job in addition to their other jobs. So I mentioned Hillary Weaver, Kevin Frater, and Marianne Diani. They all have a full caseload in addition to working on these things as well, but we fit it all in.
Okay, so we don't know, so we don't yet have a picture of how much we're spending to pursue these cases versus how much we can expect.
Yeah, I mean, we have
how much
not,
revenue
we
we
spent very little this year on the outside counsel. It has mostly been just internal resources. And I just, there's no way for, I mean, there, again, both Kevin and Marianne settled 6 or 7 cases each this year for no money. Hillary also had like 7 cases, I think, that with motions for, so they're doing it with their normal job.
When you say settled for no money, meaning?
These are their separate cases. I'm saying they're still doing their regular job in addition to working on these nonprofit property tax hearing cases.
Okay, so we won't know then maybe till next year. I mean, I think the idea is to sort of see like the sort of return on investment of pursuing these cases,
Correct.
the cost/time of pursuing the cases versus, the money that we can win over the long term for,
I will say that, and if I could just for a moment, is like we have now gotten to the point by the end of this year that we have reviewed every single one of these parcels, and that's 990 parcels that are tax exempt, that no one had been looking at for years. I mean, some of them are just blatantly, were being used for commercial purposes, or they had been sold, they were with a veteran, they are now no longer with a veteran. This is in part just good government, right? I mean, like the time that Jen just discussed and the Director of Finance just discussed about pursuing the taxes people owe, this is somewhat, what we are doing is somewhat akin to that. There are a couple of cases that are certainly, significant in the midst of this, and there are legal questions that need to be established. But I will say, once we get through that first round of court opinions on this, I think clarity will happen for all the rest of them, right? There's not a lot of case law in this area since the last Supreme Court case. And I think once we have kind of gone through a round of all of these different cases and gotten directions from the court, it will be much easier for us to continue kind of a normal taxing review pattern for these cases. But at the same time, right, every single year we fight about how much properties are assessed for. You know, we have attorneys that do it. The school district has attorneys that handle it. Like, it is just part of the government work as well. But to your point, I'm hoping that we can take more and more of it in-house.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's all I have.
Thank you.
Person. I'll turn it now to Councilwoman Gross for any questions she might have.
Thank you all. I had to step out of chamber, so I missed the part of your PowerPoint presentation, so I apologize if any of it was covered, but I'll just follow up with Councilman Warwick's comments that when we voted on last year, I think, on the outsourced attorneys to review these parcels, I remember saying at the time, this is housekeeping that should have happened for, 10, 20 years and didn't happen. And that was why it kind of took an extra effort of paying outside counsel as well as using inside counsel. So now am I hearing we're kind of gotten up to basic housekeeping and it's now more internal? Is that the way
I think we have gotten everyone up to speed with the stage that we are at. So there are kind of 4 stages to these cases.
Okay.
There's the reviewing of the parcels, there's the filing of the challenge, there's the first level of county review, and then there's the hearing review. I would say we've gotten all of those stages all internally.
Okay.
We still have these Court of Common Pleas cases, and some of those cases will require some, more sophisticated legal work that I don't know if we're quite up to speed on yet. So I just, but I do think we will, by the end of this, be able to do all of this in-house.
And those are outliers, I would call them, right? In a
Yes.
kind of data sense, right? There's of the 900 or so, 990 parcels, there's a kind of pack of some that are more like each other. And then there are these bigger, more lawyered up.
More complicated.
More
legal
complicated
issues.
is a nice way of putting it, but because they are large institutional actors, they also have very fancy attorneys on their side and lobbyists and et cetera, et cetera. And so those are, I would call them outliers. And so that is often the case that we don't keep people in-house on staff, on payroll year after year for outliers cases.
Correct.
So, okay, that I can understand.
And some of those costs also are the experts that are needed.
Yes.
So they're specific for those lawsuits, but they won't necessarily be costs that, again, once the courts have indicated more kind of what their feelings are on certain factual situations, I think we'll have more guidance and less need to fight about this continuing into the future.
That would be amazing for
It would.
for the
It would.
city. I mean, I know people have been asking for that since I was first canvassing doors for election in 2013. So that would be nice, all right? But it's a big policy at the courts level, big legal statewide kinds of level issues. So
Yeah. And I
thank you
will
for
say-
fighting the fight.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that I know that during the course of the public outreach for the budget, although it wasn't one of the things that we kind of had on the table when we talked about revenue sources, it was one that public brought up over and over again, sua sponte, on their own during the course of those discussions.
And they say it on their doorsteps too, when you're knocking on their doors. So yes, we have heard that. So for again, I think the way I usually hear it is for the nonprofits to pay their fair share. Just saying. So there's that. So, and I saw some of the slides. I was trying to watch on the monitor back in my office as well. There was, I think, a slide about the kind of big claims and big cases. But I am curious as well about the thousands of little contracts, right? I say thousands, I'm just guessing. I actually don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. Do we know how many
Generally-
contracts have to go through your department each year?
Generally, I say that we do about 600 contracts in a year.
That sounds-
So, yeah, and that's in the municipal group, which is also where they're the transactional lawyers. These people who just draft and review contracts pretty much all day long.
Yeah, that's believable,
Yeah.
right? Because we have to vote on them, and it certainly feels like that many. Tell us about that. Do you feel, because it's changed over time, sometimes there haven't been enough people in the organizational chart to do that work. So how
Yeah.
do you feel about that now? Maybe you had a
doing-
slide already, but
No, that's a good question. We are doing very well in that position. We are fully staffed with assistant solicitors at this point. A lot of amazing, smart, intelligent, dedicated attorneys who like this work. It's interesting because I always say that there are either transactional attorneys or there's litigators. Generally, they're two different types of personalities, but we have really a group that is working extremely hard and so smart and have found efficiencies, honestly handle some kind of project management issues for some of the departments too, so that they can really raise issues and make sure everyone's thought about everything while they're dealing with the contracts. And they're really impressive. We are currently looking for a head of that group, so we're still down one person in that group, an associate solicitor position. But I will say the team is extremely strong and as strong as we've ever had.
And when the contract is larger, but still not one of these kind of litigation type things, and is, if like you say, fundamental to city operations, right? Like the PWSA lease.
PWSA contract.
Or with even the intergovernmental agreements with the land bank, the array, or the tri-party agreement with the taxing bodies.
And the ARPA agreements too.
And the ARPA agreements, right? So tell me a little bit about that. How much of that is kind of like, is it like a subset of people who are like, I'm doing a contract to buy paper?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because we have that too.
So generally, we do it based on experience, and this is a great moment to shout out Anthony Byland. So we had Kristen Erickson, who was with us for the longest time, but she left in August to go into the private sector. But Anthony Byland picked up all the ARPA contracts, the PWSA contracts, and the land bank 3TB negotiations as well. He has been with the city, I think, over 7 years. He has a depth of knowledge about municipal law that is really impressive, and an ability to get his work done on time. We give him a lot, and he gets. I've never seen someone be able to write a 12-page memo quicker than Anthony can, so he really is excellent in these areas. I say, I am impressed because if we really needed outside counsel, I could go get them, but I will tell you, I don't know if there's people that know our specific area of law better than Anthony does. So I would honestly trust Anthony over I would trust outside counsel, especially on specific City of Pittsburgh municipal issues. So I'm really, I think we are in very good stead as we work on that PWSA negotiation.
I'm glad to hear that. These are issues that we also we know that our constituents care about. Because again, they're just so much more impactful to not just internal backroom city stuff, but the city stuff that impacts people's lives.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that we are resourcing that function of the law department.
Yes.
I want to make sure that we're resourcing that function of the law department. So I'm glad to hear you say that you feel.
We also hired outside counsel to assist with that. Anthony's got the main contract drafting, but this outside counsel specifically has knowledge around the Public Utility Commission issues. And so we wanted to make sure we were covering our bases on that.
Got it. Because again, that was a state law change that situates only Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority out of all of the municipal water and sewer authorities in the state of Pennsylvania. Only PWSA has an extra oversight by the Pennsylvania Utility Commission, which generally just regulates shareholder corporations. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
I think I did. Okay, thank you. And so I think that might wrap it up to me. I just wanted to make sure that we were putting enough resources there into those kinds of both daily municipal cases and also the kind of big impactful ones. And so, great. I appreciate your answers. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Short, informative, and brief. I like that. So it was good. We go back. I've known you when you were at Duquesne Light many years ago, and I always thought highly of you. And I think you're doing a really good job overall with the challenges you have there. I first wanted to talk about which I loved hearing this about your presentation. the reduction in legal fees and judgments, and is that from a concentrated effort that you've made within the department to just not settle with certain cases? Is that right?
Yeah, and I think it does come from some of the experience that I had
Yeah.
at the time that you knew me
I'll
earlier,
bet.
which
Right.
is we want people to know that the city
Sure.
of Pittsburgh takes these cases seriously, and we're not just here to roll over. I do think if you put up a good defense on a consistent basis, then people are less likely to. Sometimes you sue an easy target.
Absolutely.
And so we want to make sure
absolutely.
that they know that they are going to get we're zealously representing our client as the city of Pittsburgh, and we will only pay when, we've determined that that is really in the best interest of the city.
I love you emphasizing on that. I really do. When I see these cases that come in front of us, I don't really question, $3,500 for this,
Right.
$4,000 for that. And in the past, I just always thought, just like in my own personal life and things I've had, it's cheaper to settle than it is to fight, basically, right? And but you've taken the mantra where now we're going to make sure that not everybody who's, there are a lot of attorneys, a lot of people out there who will try to take advantage. City of Pittsburgh's easy target. Sidewalks uneven or something, and they fall, and then all of a sudden we have a lawsuit. So I'm really, really happy to hear that you are, no matter the size or of the judgment or the amount of money that they're suing us for. And I love that you have them listed up there. I'd love to see that list continue to grow, because that all adds up. I mean, every week there's something in front of us, I feel like. So so good work on that end. Yeah. You had mentioned you lost somebody to the private sector. Are we competitive? I mean, as far as salaries go?
I will say we're very competitive in the government sector.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we have gotten a number of attorneys who came from the government sector. I'll also, this is a shout out to President Biden, the public service loan forgiveness program, which I think helps all of the city, but has made a significant difference in the law department. So part of the reason we have gotten such young, smart attorneys is, one, they do want a life of public service, but also it helps that if they spend 8 years here, a lot of their loans are forgiven. They still have to make payments for those 8 years, and but that has really helped us as well to continue to attract good attorneys. Now, we will never compete with the private sector fully. There's just no way. But I want my attorneys all to have work-life balance. They are here. They work their 40 hours. They do a very good job. And sometimes they work way more than that if they're in trial or there's a pressure. But at the same time, I want to make sure that if they want to see their kids' volleyball game every night, they can go see their kids' volleyball game. So that's the package of hopefully appeal that we have for the attorneys to work here.
So I wasn't aware of this. There's a perk for governments like ours as to if you come to work for the city of Pittsburgh, after
Yes.
8 years, your loans are forgiven?
It's 8 to 10 years. It
Student
depends on the
loans.
group.
120 qualifying payments. I'm like
gonna say,
30
I didn't-
payments away, and I'm not going to hold my breath in the next 2 years. It'll still be.
Is that right?
Yeah. Federal,
is a federal
student
loan.
loans. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was
Public service loan forgiveness. Sorry, that's it.
Yeah. No.
But
and
you're
it is
making the payments for the first 8 years.
You
Yeah.
are.
So
You
it's a reduction of, what, half or something?
It depends on how much of your loans you took
Law
out.
school can be expensive.
I
Yeah.
still,
Yeah,
I'm
right,
still,
right.
I have like $20,000 worth of loans that would be eligible.
I
by
think
that time.
one of
my
our
wife's
attorneys, they over $100,000 was forgiven for them.
Yeah.
So,
that's
and
in
they
place.
are
That's
still
been-
working with us. So that's also good news.
Yeah,
but
right. And that's
but yeah.
and that was under Biden, is that right?
Biden helped solidify it.
Yeah,
it
got
was
it,
a
right. Yeah,
pre-existing. I think
okay.
it's actually under Obama originally.
Yeah.
I will say it was an act of Congress. It's not a. It's not a presidential executive order, so it's not something that can go away easily.
Good. That's
so-
the carrot you really need. I mean, in order
It
to compete
does.
with the private sector, you really can't, as you said, for wages, but, a perk like,
Yes.
that's, they can count that in as part of their salary.
Yeah.
After 8 years. And 8 years is enough time where they'll probably move on and, you get a higher paying job somewhere if they choose
Maybe.
to,
Or some
Yeah,
we
right.
do have we have
Yeah,
attorneys
yeah.
who've been with us for 15 and 20 years.
dedicated public
Exactly.
servants. Yeah,
Dedicated
good.
public servants.
Good. How many attorneys you have?
We have 20 currently right now. We have 2 open positions.
Oh, 2 open positions. Okay. And do they report here every day? Do they work from home?
The attorneys are in 3 days a week
Yeah.
and home 2 days a week, work from home 2 days a week, if needed. If they have court, if they have to come in, if
Yeah.
there's an in-person meeting, they're always, of course, here to come to. So,
Yeah, I was
yes.
just talking to Jennifer. I love the fact that people are coming to town. I don't necessarily feel that way about attorneys and what you do. You know, a lot of, like you said, you could be in court, research, whatever. I don't expect
Sometimes
them
it is
to be at
helpful
their desks here.
to be
pretty
at
much.
home and do the deep thinking
Yeah,
without any
right, yeah,
distractions.
right,
You know, but
yeah,
but I
yeah.
will say I think having everyone come back after the pandemic has been really helpful. We do potlucks and
yeah, good.
quarterly meetings.
Always good
and
to
stuff.
see people. Always
So,
good to
yeah,
interact.
You learn
with
a lot
your colleagues.
from your
Absolutely,
colleagues, too.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, to what Councilwoman Warwick was talking about with the nonprofits. You say we're at the juncture where we won half and lost half, basically, of those cases.
At this point,
Yeah.
yes.
Of those cases, how many are one of the big five? When I say big five, UPMC, Highmark, Duquesne, you know what I'm talking about. Or are they independent, businesses posing as, so where is the,
So there were 2 parcels from CMU that were a parking lot. The county found in our favor on those 2. There was 1 parcel for Pitt that was a parking lot. The county found in our favor for that one. There was a set of it's an office building, basically condo office buildings for Presbyterian University. The county found in Presbyterian University's favor for that, and there was an employee parking lot for Allegheny General, and the county found for them. So
parking lots
50%.
like the low-hanging fruit. It's hard to justify
Correct.
a parking lot, right?
That is correct.
For a nonprofit.
There is
even-
clear case law on parking
Yeah,
lots.
right,
too.
right. So how would you say, I think it was the outside attorneys, I think we approved $500,000 a couple years ago.
Denora, do you know the number? Okay.
Yeah,
I
it
think-
was north of 500, I
I
think.
think it's around 450, but.
450?
Yes.
Yeah,
but-
right. So that's,
But we have not spent all that yet.
oh, that's what I was going to ask you, really?
So
Okay.
we-
So when you say you're doing mostly in-house now, it's not because of the lack of funds, it's because you
No,
feel like
no,
you
no.
can manage it?
Yeah, we
Ah,
still have,
okay.
we still have money on those contracts, and we'll have that
Yeah.
money. It's encumbered, so it'll be taken into next year. But we just have been doing this kind of more administrative work with all in-house counsel.
Sure. Yeah, I assumed that you exasperated those funds, and that's probably why you're doing them in-house,
No.
but that's not the
Nope.
case. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Do you have a figure on as to the cases that you've won and what that means to the city every year?
I don't right now, and I should have.
Yeah, right,
I
right,
apologize.
right.
I will get
No,
back
that's
to you,
okay.
Councilman.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
It's
I
a
mean,
good
as to
question.
like, does that mean $100,000? I mean, $1 million? I don't have any idea what
Some of them
garages
were-
and what they're taxed at. I have no idea.
There was pretty significant amounts.
Yeah.
And they are paying. I know they are paying.
Yeah, and that's
So
gonna be
they started
perpetual.
paying as it's county.
Right.
I think they are also appealing. So for me, it's hard to count any chickens until.
So
the
you've
cases are
won
over.
some cases where they start paying, but
Yes.
they also are appealing.
Yes.
If they appeal and they win, do we pay them back?
Yes.
Okay.
But on the
So we're
flip
not spending
side,
that money.
On the flip side,
Yeah.
on the ones that we lost,
Right.
if we appeal those cases and we win, they have to pay back to 2023. So even if they aren't paying now, they will
Right,
owe
right.
that money.
So
in time.
the people who are sending their payments in now as if they're, taxable properties.
Correct.
That money that we're receiving, we're not spending. We're holding aside just for the simple fact that if we lose the appeal, we have to pay it back.
Yeah, I don't.
Right.
That's
That
a
goes in,
question for Ms.
where's it go?
Goulart.
What's it go into your department? Where's
No,
that?
no, that all
That's
goes
real
to
estate
finance.
taxes.
All
Yeah,
goes to
finances.
finance.
Yeah, so it's a question
And I
for
will say, we
Jennifer.
did have some that we won, and those people did not appeal to.
Yeah.
Not to your specific point,
Sure,
the larger nonprofits, but.
Sure.
But there are
Appealing
some.
process takes how long? It could.
That's it. Now we're into a normal court case. So a normal court case is, usually about 6 months for the beginning pleadings. We generally, I'd say 6 months for discovery, and then 6 months for the final trial phase.
Okay, so that's coming to a head.
Yeah,
One way
it
or the
is.
other.
Discovery will start
The
very soon.
appeals will be coming, by next year, we'll know
Yes.
whether those appeals were successful or not.
If not next year, depending on, it should be early into the next year.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I would love to get a figure as to like what we're, from the cases that you've won,
Happy to do that.
where that's at and how much cash flow that means to the city of Pittsburgh. Even the appeals, you know what I mean? Just, we'll count that, we'll cross our fingers and we hope we win or
Yeah.
they lose their appeals, okay? So, one last thing, Fern Hollow Bridge, that's a $500 cap, and that's for the entire,
All the
everybody,
cases,
all
yes.
cases. Is that right?
It's correct. It's per incident, like your insurance. It's
Yeah, right.
per
right,
occurrence,
right,
not per
right.
person.
So let me ask you this: why is it like so that, and say others going back to Leon Ford, going back to Jim Rogers? Why
the
is
difference.
it capped for the bridge,
Yeah.
but not for personal?
That's a really good
injury?
question. So the Tort Claims Act is for negligent actions under in state law in the Court of Common Pleas. The filings for Jim Rogers and for Leon Ford were under the 1983 law in federal court, which is a violation of your civil rights. Under that statute, we are both responsible for an unlimited amount, but also attorney's fees for the plaintiff as well. So it is a specific, extremely impactful federal statute that those cases are judged on, as opposed to all the other cases that were sued
Aren't we
on.
negligent with the bridge, though? Wouldn't that fall under that
No,
same thing?
negligence falls into the Tort Claims Act.
Got it.
It's whether or not we're willful that falls into the 1983 actions. But it's also a civil rights, like you have to have a kind of civil rights violation, as opposed to we just
They're just
didn't
different in
maintain
nature.
things differently.
Well,
They're different in
thank
nature.
goodness there's a cap on Fern Hollow, because,
Correct.
my goodness, I don't know what that would have cost us, right? So, okay, but another bridge falls, if it would $500,000 cap everywhere for
I'm knocking
such
on wood.
cases.
I
right?
was assisted with the bridge maintenance
Yeah, right, right.
program.
Okay,
I
good.
feel
Yeah,
much more
yeah.
comfortable about the status of our bridges.
Yeah.
So, and we also removed a bridge on 51 with the help of PennDOT
I watched
this
it
year.
the whole time,
Right.
yes.
So
it was amazing.
we've
It
shut
was
down a couple of
beautiful.
bridges. I firmly believe that the city is in a much better position than it was the day before Fern Hollow fell, and that we won't be in this situation
When that bridge
again.
was deemed the most unsafe, that one on Route 51 is.
Yes.
I stopped driving under it. I was afraid.
That was
But,
not a dumb idea.
But that was a major project, knocking that
it
thing
was a
down.
major
That was- I
project.
don't know. I can't remember what that cost, but it had to be
Yeah.
well north of $1 million.
It was very significant. It was mostly
Right.
taken care of by PennDOT, but and we're grateful.
Oh,
for
okay.
that.
So PennDOT, yeah, because
Yes.
it goes over their roadway. Right.
Yes,
But it was a city-owned bridge.
was a city-owned bridge.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. No. That's really it for me. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for your time, and I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Mosley.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for, good to see you again.
Thank you.
My first question is, on one of the slides you had showed that, as we kind of rose out of COVID, there was, increase in utilizing the services of outside counsel for, various litigation. How long do you anticipate, that uptick will be, or is that uptick already slowed down? What do you forecast for 2025 and beyond?
I do see that they've gotten over most of the hump. I mean, in last year and this year, we were doing a lot of cases that were 2016, 2017, 2018. We still have a couple of those, but I will say most of the cases now are kind of 22, 23, 24, a more reasonable time frame. We've also tried to resolve as many as we could this year, knowing that next year and the year after are slimmer. So we have kind of put a concerted effort. I'll say another little uptick is we are all now caught up on our claims. So claims got horribly behind during COVID. And so we were last year, we were dealing still with some 2020 claims that we had. We've gotten those all cleaned up. We have all past years, and we're pretty much on target. So that was also kind of an increase in money. So I do think next year should be much closer to kind of a normal presentation of cases.
I appreciate that. And just from a ballpark figure, I know we talked about, how many contracts we get a year, like how many in a ballpark, from your ballpark perspective, how many claims do we generally get?
How many claims do we get?
I know the number. I just don't know, like the value, but not the.
Yeah, I don't know the number either. I don't ever recall, but let me get
Okay.
back to you. Margaret
Okay.
Vitale.
I feel like it's typical that we have like maybe 2 or 3 a week on average.
Gotcha.
Smaller ones of.
Those are the ones that come through, but I think we actually have
Oh, boy,
more
never
than
mind.
that. Because we do settle a lot of those underneath the council limits. So
Yeah.
those are paid off too. So let me double check.
Okay.
I'll find out.
Yeah, and just from like a 30,000 foot view, and I thank you for the presentation. What do you feel are the top priorities of the law department going into 2025? Like, what are the primary goals and the things that you want to accomplish and the things you think are most important?
That's a really good question. I certainly sense the nonprofit property tax exemption part will start to heat up. Getting us all trained up on that and working through that, I think, is really one of our top priorities. I'll also say our real estate department has really been moving in full speed. We are taking care of the backlog of deeds that have been and clearing title in ways that are way more efficient than they were in the past. So we are now processing more deeds than we do get requests in every month. We're hoping to get that backlog cleared out, and then the kind of weight that people take when they buy property from the city of Pittsburgh, we really try and shorten as much as possible. Let me say it's a long process, like, quieting title and all of these things are a long process, but we have worked very hard to find a critical path for those processes so that we get them done as efficiently as humanly possible. And then I will say, I think the PWSA negotiations are extremely important for us. Certainly, PWSA is, an authority of the city, but at the same time, they are a separate legal entity from us. So we need to make sure that we are protecting the city of Pittsburgh and its residents and what they want.
Yeah, and do you have any thoughts around, in the spirit of that intergovernmental cooperation, around, the current, conversation around the land bank and the tri-party agreement and, expanding the board, as far as whatever, being married to a judge, I know there's some certain things that you can talk about, you can't talk about, but you have any, particular thoughts of how, the negotiations, with PWSA and this intergovernmental cooperation, how the law department fits into those conversations as we look to bring on someone from the county as well as somebody from the school board onto the land bank.
Right. I think that's really important because I'm always conscious of the fact that while we're processing those 3 TB properties, and for everybody at home, the 3 taxing bodies, but we just call them the 3 TB for short, is we're holding those in trust for both the county and the school board. And it is important that we get as much as we can of the last taxes, but at the same time, we're balancing the fact that we also need to get these properties back on the rolls and someone living there and someone producing from there and someone paying taxes from there. So I think those pieces are really important. For me, I am grateful for the land bank's contributions in that I think the real focus has to be these 10,000 parcels that we have. Certainly, the ones that we have houses as soon as possible because they are liability concerns for the city, but the rest of those parcels, I want to get moving as well. So I am hopeful that until I heard Director Gula's discussion about kind of the treasurer's sale and the scope of the treasurer's sale, but we really need to start dealing with the backlog of properties that we're holding on to and get rid of as many that the city is holding on to as possible. I heard Councilman Coghill talk about it. We're not a good neighbor often, right? And so I think the best position we can be in is getting as many of these properties into the hands of people who can really make a difference in their communities.
Sure, and just for the public's civic education, could you talk about what role does the law department play in that, process of getting properties,
sure,
out of our ownership and back.
Yeah, so we
to
handle
private
the
ownership
deeds,
and on the tax rolls.
the deed process. So finance does the first part of selling a parcel, and then they send the parcels up to us to do both the quieting title. So we make filings. Those are legal filings that we make in court to quiet the title. So you give notice to everyone that's supposed to have notice: mortgage holders, lien holders on a property, the purchasers or the people who owned it before. And we make sure everyone has notice and a chance to have their legal rights heard. And then we do that process of cleaning the title so that when it is finally sold to someone, it is clear and the deed is. Sometimes in treasurer's sale, they don't have a quieted title. They get a deed that they will still have to do the process of quieting a title. But that's still a separate deed that we need to get processed through as well too, and to make sure that we are covering all of the compliance needs for the proper transfer of these properties. So we have 4 people in the real estate team that work on that, in addition to an attorney. And all day long, they are processing this, sending out the paperwork, receiving the paperwork in again, making sure that we have all of the pieces in that together. And so they are crucial to us making sure that out of these 10,000 properties, and to Director Gould is talking about selling them, we've got to be as efficient as possible so that they can move as efficiently as possible to sell other properties.
So 2 quick follow-up questions. Generally, what is the typical time horizon for quieting a title? And then what are some of the strategies and things that you do or can do to expedite that process?
Yeah, so we will, I will say I don't know if we have a typical time yet, and we're still building our metrics on it. 6 months would be good. Some of them have taken significantly longer than that. Some of the strategies we've built is we are working on different assignments throughout our department so that people are checking different things. Part of it is just the mail, keeping track of the mail. So we now have someone whose job it is to track all of the mail and to figure out that which case, because you need to get a certificate of service proof back on this. Now, that has been complicated by everything that's happened since the pandemic with the Postal Service. Postal Service getting certificates of mail back is much harder than it used to be. If we don't do that, then we do a publication or a sheriff's service. So we make decisions on which cases. Now, those have different cost structures. They have different approvals with the courts. And so we need to make sure we're doing everything properly in accordance with the statutes, but at the same time trying to do it as efficiently as possible too. So we've been kind of playing with all those levers to figure out what makes the most sense. Where are we spending our money? Where are we trying to save a little bit of money, but it's actually costing us 6 months, so it's not worth trying to save a little bit of money on that. So we're kind of tracking all of those pieces. We also have new goals for each of our employees so that they have cases that they are owning and they are responsible. So we have we send out all the information 30 days in. They check to see if everything's back. If everything's not back, they check another 30 days, but they kind of have goals that they're tracking. And then we have stepped up ways that we engage with the people that we need to give notice if we're having issues with a certain case. We don't want some to hold up others. So we there's some cases that are pretty easy and try and get those through as quickly as possible. And then others that will require more time and more strategies.
Thank you. And my final question is, as you look to 2025, particularly, with the budget in mind, what do you see are the greatest challenges, to the law department, as far as reaching, the goals and aspirations that you've articulated in your presentation?
I'll say in my position, my greatest challenge is making sure that I am serving the people who work for me. I want to make sure that I'm getting rid of all the barriers for them, that I am assisting them, that I am inspiring them, and that I'm also telling them, making sure I get enough time to tell them how great of a job that they're doing, because I want them to feel appreciated, because our law department depends on the fact that we have very smart, intelligent, and dedicated people here, and they need to know how valued they are in order for us to keep doing the work.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you all. And I want to say first off that it's been truly a pleasure to work with you as the chair of the Finance and Law Committee. You and your team, your 40-person team, is just tremendous and hardworking. Everything that you said already. So I'm glad that you had a moment to call that out as well. I have a few questions for you that I don't believe were covered already. So I know that we've already discussed this in briefings prior to this, but for everyone's awareness, when we see that reduction in the allocation for judgments to about 1.03 million, you showed us in your presentation the reasons why and your justification for that. But if it becomes inadequate for whatever reason, if we're obviously heading in the direction where we need more, clearly there's the potential for an interdepartmental transfer, and that's an option. If it's large enough, what happens then? Will council be apprised with enough time to make a budget amendment? We'll have to draw the funds from elsewhere.
Yes, if it's large enough, we'll be able to. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll be able to have enough time. I am very hopeful. We have a couple of other levers that we can push. One things that we've done in past years is we have settled cases but told them we couldn't pay until the next year. So that is one, lever that we could possibly do. I will say other times, if people will not settle for a reasonable amount of money, we will go to trial. And if we go to trial, that will not necessarily resolve this year. And if we appeal that, that will definitely not resolve this year. So there's different ways that we can handle if we don't have the money to be able to handle it. But we have been working very hard the last couple of months, and thanks to Denora and Jesse, and you are going to see a lot of things right now. We are trying to settle as many cases as we can right now with the money that we've got in the account at this moment, so that next year is as low as possible. I also don't know, some years we need a lot of outside legal fees, some years we don't. So I think we also have the possibility to kind of play between those two accounts in a way that's less impactful for the rest of the city.
And my last question is, answer to the extent that you can or you feel comfortable with a hypothetical, but with a new federal administration coming in, if there was some sort of attempt to alter or renege on a funding source that impacted, say, a major infrastructure project or CDBG or anything like that, what would the law department's stance be to represent the city?
We have been looking at that already. It does depend on where we're at in the process. So there are some, it depends on the federal funding source, I guess is what I'm saying. Some of those are pretty, if they've firmly gone through the regulation period of time, I think we stand on good standing, and it would be difficult for them to turn back. There are others, though, that are still in the early stages, or ones that we're counting on and we've applied for and perhaps we would have gotten in the past that so we will have to address whether or not legally we think there's a strong chance that we would be successful, because there are certain levers that the federal government can play on this. I will say my team has, from the beginning of the ARPA allocations, worked extremely hard to make sure we were fully compliant with the regulations. And I think you all have been part of that. Sometimes that, it leads to different conversations, but I am very comfortable that we have done that with the mindset of, if we are audited, we are comfortable with the choices that the city has made, and that we are fully compliant with the rules and regulations. It is part of the reason why it is important to get these contracts done before the end of the year, because that is under ARPA regulations. All the money needs to be, but we are very close to that point.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions. So I appreciate your time with us today, and I will allow you to get back to your other part of your job. It doesn't involve council hearings.
Madam Chair, can
yes.
I just have a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Just real quickly, we were talking about Fern Hollow, and we have a $500,000 cap, right? There are other defendants in this. Who are they? Is it PennDOT or there's other lawsuits that are pending.
Yes,
correct?
I think there's two engineering firms. I can't remember their names.
Yeah.
But I
Oh,
think
engineering
there's
firms.
engineering
Okay.
firms.
They also have a cap. No.
They do not.
Okay. So my question really was, God forbid we lost a life, and obviously there's, whether it's post-traumatic or physical ailments that happened there that day, somebody has to compensate them, I guess. So we're locked in at 500, which we already agreed and paid.
Yes.
And the other taxing bodies are still, or I mean, the other, the engineering groups are still in litigation.
Correct.
Okay. So that's where they're compensated, what they really probably should be compensated.
They're still early in the case, so I would
Right,
say
right.
I don't know where the liability will show up.
Right. The other thing was, we had an attorney for council that went on to greener pastures recently,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Friedson. I want to, first of all, compliment you. You've been really great, whether it's the pickleball court, small things I see, you have a lot on your plate, but your attention to the little things really is, I care as much about as anything. So I appreciate you, looking into that. So obviously we can come to you for legal help. We have in the past. I have in the past. I thought Mr. Friedson was, a benefit for us to have here, just to go to without, going through your busy schedule or all your attorneys. So is there somebody in particular, if council, I go to you, I know, which is, it's nice to go to the boss, but is there somebody in particular that will work with council if we have legal questions in general, or will you just assign whoever you have best to?
That's part of the juggling act, and it's part of the reason it goes through me is to make sure that everybody's kind of balanced and no one's overworked. I will say, you certainly can reach out to whoever you want to,
Right.
and they will respond. But I also try and make sure I know about it so that we're all on the same page. I don't want you. Sometimes if you ask two lawyers, you get two opinions, and I want us to make sure that we're all,
Gotcha,
being
yeah.
cohesive in our.
You really put it in the
advice.
right person's hands for whatever
Yes.
the issue might be, I guess, is the way
Yes.
generalizing
Yeah.
it, right?
They do have different knowledge bases
Okay.
that sometimes can be
She
helpful.
seems like a pretty good boss. You agree?
She is.
All right,
Yeah.
good deal. Good deal. Okay, that's it for me, Madam Chair. Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
the
you for
extra
your
time.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
I'd like to call up the Ethics Hearing Board to join us.
The mission for the Ethics Hearing Board is to preserve the trust placed in the public servants of the city, to promote public confidence in government, to protect the integrity of government decision-making, and enhance government efficiency. A quick overview, the Ethics Hearing Board comprises 9 members with reputations of personal integrity and honesty. Designed to be an impartial arm of government, 7 of its 9 members are selected by community organizations. The board staff includes an executive director. Those served by the board include current, former, and prospective officials and employees, including those acting under contract, consultants, campaign contributors, and persons and entities who do or seek to do business with the city, third parties involved with covered conduct, and those who give gifts to covered parties or their relatives. A quick position summary: there is 1 full-time position for the Ethics Hearing Board in the 2025 budget, same as last year, and a 3% increase there. And there is no changes otherwise to their budget.
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. Welcome, and if you'd like to introduce yourself and provide us with any overview or information you'd like us to have before we ask questions.
Sure. Thank you. So my name's Leanne Davis. I'm the Executive Director and Ethics Officer for the board. I have a small PowerPoint presentation. I know you guys already have had a long day. I'm not able to
Let me pull that up real
show
quick.
it on the
I got
Zoom.
you.
Okay, thanks. I'll try to be brief since it's a very small ask that I have today.
Okay. We also have the printouts.
Yeah, we also, Kirsten, thank you for printing those out, but we will share those as well.
Oh, here we go.
Thanks.
I've gotten.
Are you in?
I guess I have.
Okay, I'm sharing it now, so
Oh, okay.
I can steer if you're happy with that.
Great, thank you. So the Ethics Hearing Board, as you see our mission statements up there, a common motto for governmental ethics agencies is to say that public service is a public trust. So our role is to ensure that the stewards for government are acting in the public interest. Simple enough. So with that simple mission, we have a number of complex laws that we work with and under, ranging from state law, the Home Rule Charter, our own city code, from various parts, including Chapter 161 on contracting, 198 on campaign finance, prospectively 196 on lobbying, and we also work with regulations for both of those. So anything that's adopted within our jurisdiction is something that we can provide services for. So this is a great benefit for the city because there are aspects of, say, for example, the Home Rule Charter that are from, what is it, like 1974, I think is when it was created. And there's no way of changing that other than if there's a ballot initiative. So if we bring in something from the Home Rule Charter, our board, which is an independent agency, can look at that and make sure that it's still serving the public interest and issue regulations that administer and interpret the intent there. So to borrow from the Philadelphia Board of Ethics, our ethics services are like a three-pronged stool. We need to have all three in balance in order to do a good job in our services. Now, if this wasn't, we weren't looking at 2025, I would have a bigger ask. I know it's going to be a lean year for 2025, 2026 at least. But anyhow, education is really important because we need to make sure that people can identify when to ask for advice. We have several different ways that the board issues advice. They're essentially like a thoroughly researched legal opinion. And then, of course, enforcement is necessary. So there's a lot of subject matters that are already under our jurisdiction. Conflicts of interest are commonly associated with governmental ethics. We also have very strict financial interest restrictions on contracting, political activity, campaign finance, use of position generally. We also have an extensive personal jurisdiction, the different types of people that we can help. So we serve not only public employees and public officials that are current, we also can provide assistance and advice for former employees, as well as for nominees for public office, our board and commission members, and candidates for elected office. As well as just helping build a general civics knowledge with the public. So in justification for my budget request this year, I've noted that our requests for advisory opinions have increased threefold. Again, these are thoroughly researched opinions where we have to support the board's position with the law. Once these are issued and the board can kind of create like a benchmark or a line in the sand, then I can issue more quickly issue formal advisories that would be consistent with what the board has created their position on. So this is a hard slide to look at. It's a lot of text. It's all the bad things and reasons for why we do need some more support in the ethics office. I would just say overall that an increased presence and awareness of the ethics board could really serve to prevent problems. So if we can have more training and ongoing engagement, we could really serve the public by preventing problems. So my ask is really simple, so I hate to take up so much of your time. It's just one position. It's a full-time position. It would be grade step 18G, which would take on the ethics and engagement. So this would help with creating trainings at the orientation level, creating guidebooks and handbooks to help not only employees, but vendors, prospective vendors who are looking to do business and their restrictions as well as candidates for elected office and nominees could have specialized handbooks that could help explain some of the complicated disclosures that are, it's state law, it's a state form, we can't change the form, but we could help people understand it better and how to file. So this person could help with creating guidebooks, the training, disclosures, project management. Yeah.
Ready?
Yes. The other very small ask that I have is for paid interns. So if I'm able to have, some basic legal support that could help allow me to free up my time for the more complex issues. Councilman Coghill, I think you would appreciate this cost savings. I have the $20 an hour for the law clerk versus $400 an hour for the outside counsel. I think it's just basic math, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so I would just close in a recent index. It's the World Happiness Report. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. It's like every year Finland does really great. One of the crucial factors that they said is honesty in government. Honesty in government is crucial for the well-being of its citizens. To me, I think that's really self-explanatory. How we view government and the trust that we have takes a long time to build. So having this extra support could create some proactive engagement. Again, it could help like some civics education for the general public as well, so that we can prevent misinformation campaigns. Because, once what is that expression about, like an empty glass? It's easier to fill. So if we can fill the empty glass with like good, solid education, then we can try to help make sure people understand government, the role of government, what we can do, how we can improve, not only for our generation, but for those to come. It's also been proven to increase employee morale, I would also say. So that could help us with retention. So thank you for that. I also have appendix slides in case there are follow-up questions. But I also just wanted to take a moment and say thank you. It's been such an honor working for the city and getting to know some of you guys and all the great work that you do, not only for the residents of Pittsburgh today, but, I've truly feel that you guys care about Pittsburghers and the future generations to come. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the work that you do and your service to the city as well. And I'll open it up to questions from members, starting with Councilperson Warwick.
Thank you, Leanne. You're always very helpful and responsive. I appreciate it. I guess I just have one quick question. So the 15,000 that you're proposed, that is in the current budget or not?
No, none of these requests were adopted into the current budget.
Okay. I was just wanting to.
Unfortunately. So.
Okay.
Yeah. This would be, I think, a council addendum.
Right.
I'm not sure.
That's I just wanted to.
Yes, thank
that.
you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't have any questions. Otherwise, it's all very thorough. Thank you.
Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any other follow-up questions either, but I guess it will be. I'll follow up with our council budget office because, as you point out, we will be having our own discussions around amendments to the proposed budget. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to be so easy.
Okay.
I have some questions. Not that my intent is to be hard on you, but first of all, I want to thank you for always being available to my Lisa, who is often on the phone with you about many, many things. And you've always made time, and she completely understands pretty much everything. In the past, what's been a sticking point for me in specifically is, can we please get on this same page with our reports? In tandem with the county and the controller's office. I feel like I just need to get you three in a room and be like,
yes,
let's just have a same form. The forms are different. I feel like this prohibits people from running for office. I will tell you, I couldn't navigate my way through all the different reports and different times if I had to by myself, but I'm lucky that I have Lisa to do that for me. But you would have to pay somebody. So for me, it restricts people from running for office, and if they do, then they end up in a heap of trouble because they didn't file their reports on time and things of that nature. And I know you've made some advancement in that. I can't remember which part, but so I also know I have a report due coming up with you in December. So, that's starting the report season for me. So I wish we could just get on the same page where we have the same form. I think we should duplicate the counties. I don't know if you have other information that the county doesn't need, or we try to work it out with the county because they're the original purveyors of this. So I wish we could have just one form and we could just put it in a copy machine and send it off to you all at once. But as it is, I want to say there's 7 different reports in a election cycle for me. It's I don't even know how many. I lose track. So I hope we can get to that point. I really do, Leanne. You've tried, I know. Okay, so I want to surround a question I had last night. If, say, of our caps, our limits, we can raise $5,000 from a political action committee. I think $2,800 or $2,900 from an individual.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why we do that still. I feel like we should eliminate that, honestly. But so if I want to run for state senate, say, right, and in that, well, I'm not giving up my job here, running as on my off year, and if I raise $200,000, right, I lose the state senate race, but I still have $150,000 or $100,000 left. Next year, it's still in my PAC. I'm entitled to spend, even though gifts might be $25,000 from some political action committee. There's no limit on that, correct? So because when I raised that money, I was running for a different seat, right? So there's no limit on that as far as a state senate seat goes. I could raise $1 million. One person could give me $1 million if they would like. But when I come back, if I lose and I come back and I still have, again, $500,000 in my PAC from, of course these are inflated, I'm just throwing out this scenario to you, then I have the potential to use that money for my city council race without questioning where that money came from and what the limits were, correct?
You're giving me a great example of how advice differs from general education because it's so complex. I think anyone who could be listening right now, so I want to address 2 different things. First, you talk about the filing, and the forms, all of that. And then secondly, about the contribution limits. And so as to the specifics of that, we can definitely kind of look at that offline. The board's role is to make sure that there is common sense application for the requirements and make sure that they, are reasonable and upholding the public interest, right? And you do note that the city candidates are subject to equivalencies as to the Federal Elections Commission thresholds for contribution limits from individual contributors. And there are candidate committees. So there's some intricacies there that we can talk about for an advisory. As for the filing and the form, some of them are state forms that are outside of our control, of course, but we could, create a pamphlet that helps explain it. I am also invested in creating more synergy, I guess is the word, in terms of filing. Right now, a candidate would need to, I think first they go to the county elections office and get the packet of what to do, and then they go to the clerk's office, and then they go to my office, and then they go to back to the county office, and then they go to the controller's office, right? So it's kind of a maze of, if you didn't already know city government, which hopefully you do before you run, it's definitely an intensive process. And so I've been working with the controller's office and having some success in hopefully creating more synergy there. Now, the statement of financial interest form has to be filed with the city clerk. So that's something that I don't think we can really change to have the controller accept that one. But having the administration and interpretation of those things through the independent ethics board, it makes sense so that, it's removed from politics, it's impartial. So I hope that answers your question somewhat.
Well, I guess I'm still looking for the answer as to if I were to raise money in another race and I come back as a city council person, and if somebody gave me $100,000, I could use that without any restrictions.
So it depends who the you is. So I hate to give a lawyerly advice of it depends, but there are some specifics there as to what type of committee it is, and we can look
Friends
into
of
that.
Anthony Coghill. Yeah,
Okay.
And again, if I raise money elsewhere, but even though I have limits in what I can do running for this office, but I could run for another office and raise as much as I can or as much as I want. But at the same time, when I lose that race, I could come back here and spend all that money in my race. So that's what I just feel like the limits, we kind of handicap ourselves in that. I really don't see them to be necessary, but that's not for you and this discussion at this point. So I just want to say another thing, Leanne. You know, it's a world of difference between you and the last, Miss King, I believe it was, your predecessor. You probably don't know her. No. But you are much more available. We tried to get reports in a day of a deadline, and the door was locked. And again, the way you deal with Lisa on a regular basis, you know, you're very refreshing compared to the last council that was here, I would say. And you had mentioned the interns that you'd like to have. I feel need to help. So there are times where you have to hire outside help?
We do have a professional services budget of $30,000.
Okay.
And so when my time is maxed, it's...
Right. When you need help, you have to call Conan Grigsby or whatever, somebody else, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, there could be more efficient ways
So
of
you got
handling that.
30,000 to work with there, which helps, I guess. But
Correct, yeah.
But more of if you had the interns at, what was he asking per year? $15,000. $15,000? Yeah. You won't have a problem with me on that, I will tell you. I feel like you need to help. I don't know where we'll take it from, but we'll figure it out as we go, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you know personally that I think there's a huge benefit in reaching out to people ahead of time before the deadline. It's quite challenging trying to get a hold of some of these candidates because we don't control the ballot, right? So we can't always find people. Right. So, but I try to find them and call them and make sure that they're aware of our regulations and other steps that they need to go through. So that's something this role could also help with. I think somebody said that these disclosure forms are so complicated that you need a full-time dedicated person to some of these forms.
I think it was me.
That might have been you.
I do. I really do. If it weren't for me having that in-house with Lisa, I think I'd have to hire somebody. I don't think I could get through it.
Right. So, I mean, that's another service that an education and engagement coordinator could do to help with those sorts of things.
That's great. I'm sold. It's good by me. So I appreciate the small ask. It is a small ask. So it's one I hope we can find funds to help you out and help us out really in the end too. So thank you, Leanne. I appreciate you being here. You're doing a wonderful job. You've been 4 years on the job, or?
Oh, the years, I don't know. I've been with the city over, I think, 13 years now.
Oh, really? Okay.
But this role less.
Gotcha.
Less time.
Yeah,
Sure.
right,
All right.
right.
The only other thing I would say about advice is that the board requires its own advice to be administered to serve the protective function of a defense. So if someone comes to the board and asks us for advice, then if there is a complaint about the same matter, it's dismissed.
Who is your ethics?
But if someone gets like outside counsel, law department, something like that, if it's not from the board itself, it's not a defense. So we really want to stress that it's important and protective.
How many board members do you have?
We have 9 seats on our board,
9?
and 7 of those come from community and outside organizations, so that it can be independent.
Are they appointed by you, or?
So I try to help with recruitment. I call some colleges and try to get people who are interested to apply.
So you nominate them and you put them in front of us and we okay them, I guess. But it's you who.
So they're all different community organizations. So the URA has a seat. The Chamber of Commerce has a seat. There's a Pittsburgh Commission on Higher Education has a seat.
Right. I got you.
And 1 seat from council president and 1 seat
That's
from the mayor.
That's what I was going to ask you. We do have a seat on that board.
Correct.
Great. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay, Leanne, thank you again. I think you do a great job. I really do. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Mosley.
Yeah, good to see you, Leanne, and it was good. It was really good to get to know you over the course of 2023, and I echo the comments of my colleagues. You do a fantastic job. I maybe have a question or two. I just kind of wanted to, just suss out a little bit your statement when you talked about bringing on an intern as well as an additional employee, and you mentioned specifically to open you up to do like more complex, work. Could you kind of, give us a comparison of what a more complex project or some more complex work you would do versus some of the typical traditional, things that you could hand over to an intern or to an assistant staff person?
Right. Okay. So right now it is, the office of one. So I am doing my own invoicing, my own administrative support, my own scheduling for trainings and things like that. It's been a big challenge this year, learning the JDE software. If anybody is familiar with that, I think it's...
there's a learning curve with it.
Yeah, there's a learning curve with it for sure. And it's not the best bang for the city's buck to have the executive director who's there for legal guidance and to be doing some of that. Also, for me, just how you have the chief legal officer here give very thorough and detailed answers. It's a different mindset being a lawyer than being a communications major, right? So a communications major can come in and say, like, here's the 3 bullet points you need to hear, right? It's a different kind of skill set. So here's this training, here's the presentation, and it's going to be more successful from someone with those skill points, because if I'm doing the training, I'm going to say, well, yeah, in this case, but except for that condition, and by the way, that's a defined term, and it only applies to these 3 things, and I can see, your eyes are glazing, and so it's not going to be as successful, because the real point of education is to engage people so they can remember what the basic points are when these things are going to come up in real life. So I think that is something that the training and education is something that could be better delegated. In terms of legal interns, for example, we have a restriction on political activity, but we have no definition for political activity. We don't know. There's nothing within state law that applies to City of Pittsburgh employees that demonstrates whether specific actions should be prohibited or permitted conduct. If you look at the state level, it's extremely extensive. They say, like, you can't take someone to the polls, you can't sign a ballot, all those different types of activities. But there's nothing written right now for City of Pittsburgh. So I think that would be a more intensive, complex project for me to look at different agencies to see kind of what benchmarks there are, in Philadelphia and New York and Chicago, different cities that have long-standing offices. I'm also working on updating our legislation. Since this is a budget meeting, I could discuss that if we adopt lobbying into our jurisdiction, then we would create revenue for the city that isn't there right now. Like, for example, everybody knows there was a Darlene Harris case. And so she didn't fill out a particular campaign finance form, right? She said, I don't think the ethics board has any jurisdiction, blah, 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 right? And so there was a $50 a day fine. Mm-hmm. And it's uncapped. So by the time it went to public hearing, because our council postponed it, it ended up being $4,100 something. It's over $4,000 for that fine. And so the same thing can happen with lobbying disclosures. If somebody fails to register as a lobbyist, it could be the same thing, $50 a day. For those types of things. And also having it right now within the controller's office, there's no enforcement mechanism for, because what are they going to do, write a report and say, that wasn't great? Mm-hmm. We can actually issue fines and take it to court, because our enforcement process is the quasi-judicial hearing process, like the EEOC or, NLRB, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. And just one follow up, being that you mentioned, lobbyists. Would there be beyond fines? Would there be any other like fees or other ways to collect revenue?
Yeah, they're supposed to be paying $100 a year right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have no further questions. So unless there's anything you'd like to add, any further questions, I will take a motion to recess.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Budget hearing is recessed. Thank you.